Chapter 233. Each uses a strange move. The dry-haired cultivator was crushed to death. Bao Dingheng and the others were shocked to see this scene. After killing this person, Zhang Yan didn't stop. He leaped to a high place, raised his hand, and pointed in front of him. The two golden hammers flew up and smashed toward the white-robed Taoist with a dull sound. The white-robed Taoist was also terrified when he saw his fellow Taoist die so miserably. When he saw Zhang Yan charging toward him, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He hurriedly stepped on a cloud and retreated, trying to avoid the two golden hammers that were chasing after him. Zhang Yan revealed a mocking expression. He got up and followed on a cloud, but he was right behind the Taoist. It wasn't without reason that he targeted this person first. He had also seen it clearly. Although Priest Gao and Bao Dingheng were working together to fight the enemy, they were also showing off their own wits. They both had the thought of forcing the other to use their final trump card first, and this could be used by him. Thus, he didn't care about Bao Dingheng and his senior brother. He only focused on chasing after the white-robed Taoist. As expected, the two of them slowed down their attacks at the same time. They seemed to want him to kill the white-robed Taoist. Only Taoist Gao chased after Zhang Yan. He held the cleaving thunder seal in the air, ready to help at any time. The white-robed Taoist turned a few times on the flying light and finally got rid of the two golden hammers. He couldn't help but calm down. However, he suddenly felt the sky above his head darken. It turned out that Zhang Yan had used the hand of profound light to press down from the sky. This palm was like Mount Tai pressing down on an egg. The air whirled violently, and the wind blew rapidly. Thinking about the death of his companion, the white-robed Taoist's face turned pale. He didn't have the guts to take it head-on and tried to find a way to escape. Zhang Yan sneered and waved his sleeve. A dozen rays of Tai profound light slashed toward him. Right now, he was at the third level of the mystic light realm, and his mystic light was as condensed as one. Every ray of mystic light wasn't weaker than a normal flying sword or magical weapon, and it instantly forced the white-robed Taoist to dodge left and right. He was in a bad state, but he couldn't escape in time. Seeing that he couldn't dodge anymore, he could only force the mystic light out of his body and defend. Seeing Zhang Yan in a critical situation, Taoist Gao became anxious and placed the Chop the Thunder seal on top of Zhang Yan's head. He shouted repeatedly and sent down several more lightning bolts. Zhang Yan laughed loudly. With a wave of his sleeve, the two golden hammers flew back and blocked in front of him. Even though they were struck by the lightning, they were unable to get close to him. Even though the sword energy from Bao Dingheng and his senior brother landed on him, they didn't use their full strength. Moreover, he was covered by treasured clothes, and his body was as tough as metal. Therefore, they only created countless golden sparks and weren't able to stop him for even a moment. Killing intent appeared in his eyes, and the yellow hand slammed down. With a boom, it scattered the mystic light above the white-robed Taoist's head. Then, it landed heavily on the Taoist's body. With a scream, the Taoist fell down like a kite with its string cut. Before he could land, the yellow hand reached down again and grabbed half of the Taoist's body. Zhang Yan looked around and saw another bolt of lightning descending. He smiled faintly and commanded the yellow hand to pull the Taoist up. Taoist Gao was shocked, but he couldn't pull back in time. With a loud bang, a light flashed in front of everyone's eyes, and the white-robed Taoist exploded into a rain of blood. Zhang Yan didn't expect the lightning to be so powerful. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and he couldn't help but take another look at the copper seal hovering in the air. In just an instant, he had killed two people from Taoist Bao's side, and both of them had died extremely horribly. The expressions of the remaining three became even more solemn. They saw Zhang Yan standing in the air with his hands behind his back. His aura was high, and his hammers were spinning around his body. Above his head was a large yellow hand that looked like a crown. His fingers and palms stirred up the wind and clouds, blotting out the sun and moon, and stirring up the smoke. He seemed to be bearing the might of 1,000 caddies. When they thought of his indestructible body, the thought of being unable to fight against him arose in their hearts. However, the three of them weren't from the great clans of the profound sects. They'd cultivated to their current realm, and they'd experienced countless hardships and tribulations along the way. Their willpower and perseverance weren't something an ordinary cultivator could compare to. Even though the current situation was slightly disadvantageous, it might not be able to scare them away. Bao Dingheng, in particular, thought that he still had a few tricks he hadn't used, and he wasn't willing to stop so easily. However, he could clearly see that he could protect himself with his own strength, but he couldn't kill Li Yuanba. He turned to look at Taoist Gao, and coincidentally, the latter was also looking at him. Although Taoist Gao's expression was unsightly, there was clearly no fear in his eyes. Instead, a hint of ruthlessness flashed across them. Bao Dingheng's heart moved. At present, Li Yuanba had already killed 3 people from Taoist Gao's side, and he was the only one left. His threat to Bao Dingheng's side was greatly reduced, so he could attack with ease. However, he still gritted his teeth and resisted with all his might. Bao Dingheng saw that Fang He had opened up the sword formation. Even though it was strenuous for him to deal with it, Li Yuanba wouldn't be able to attack for a while, so he relaxed and took out an iron ruler from his sleeve. This ruler was completely black and dark like a piece of inkstone. However, there were dozens of inscriptions on it. When he rubbed it with his hand, it gave off a faint luster. He raised the object in the air with both hands and muttered something. The light became more and more eye-catching and dazzling. In the end, it had already turned into an ink-colored cloud of fire that danced in the air. He shouted, "Junior Marshal Brother, dodge a little." Fang He had never seen this ruler-shaped transcendent artifact before. Hearing Bao Dingheng's words this time, it must be extremely powerful. Furthermore, he was already exhausted by the mysterious yellow hand and wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Hearing this, he hurriedly put away the sword plate and flew back, dodging to the side. Taoist Gao was also vigilant and thought to himself, "I wonder what kind of transcendent artifact this is. This person looks sanctimonious, but he's actually sinister and cunning. Don't drag me down with you. Why don't I go a little further?" He also rolled up his sleeves and dodged to the side. As the two of them dodged, Zhang Yan's field of vision opened up in front of him. Seeing the ink-colored cloud in Bao Dingheng's hands, he laughed and said, "Daoist Bao, you're not going to dodge anymore." Without waiting for Bao Dingheng to make a move, he spread out the mysterious yellow hand and made it bigger, grabbing at Bao Dingheng first. Bao Dingheng said, "Good move." He threw the inky cloud at the Xianhuang hand, and an iron ruler rushed out of the black cloud and smashed into the Xianhuang hand. A loud sound that could collapse mountains and split the earth rang out in the air. It was as if a golden mountain had been pushed down and a jade pillar had been toppled. The mysterious yellow hand collapsed with a loud bang and turned into rolling yellow clouds. At the same time, the black cloud pressed down like a dark cloud, making whining sounds along the way. It was like a huge beast that wanted to swallow Zhang Yan in one gulp. Bao Dingheng's voice came from the cloud. "Fellow Daoist Gao, what are you waiting for? If you don't make a move now, I'm afraid it'll be too late." Although he had shattered the mysterious yellow hand, as long as Zhang Yan made another hand seal, it wouldn't take long for him to reform it again. He could only take advantage of this gap to attack fiercely and force Zhang Yan to be unable to free his hand. Just now, he could talk about other things. Daoist Gao's eyes sharpened. With a flip of his palm, a copper-colored flying sand leaked out of his sleeve and he held it in his hand. He didn't know the origin of this thing, but when he obtained this dead cultivator's cave abode that day, he found it in a gourd. Its power was unbelievably great. When it was thrown out, once it came into contact with one's body, it would destroy flesh and bones. Even a body of metal could be ground away. Because of this thing in his hand, he didn't have to fear Zhang Yan. Unfortunately, the amount of this sand was too little. Every time he used it, it would be a little less, so he couldn't bear to use more. At this moment, the handful in his hand was only 40 to 50 grains. He thought it was enough to deal with Li Yuanba. His eyes narrowed, and he fixed his gaze on that figure. With a shake of his hand, he threw all the red sand over. #target =_ blank. Chapter 234. Chapter 95, hit by mistake. The crimson copper flying sand in Priest Gao's hands scattered out, instantly turning into countless fine dust fragments that filled the sky and rained down. Not long after the crimson copper flying sand was thrown out, it scattered in all directions and drifted with the wind. In a flash, it had already expanded to a distance of more than 300 meters. However, before it could reach Zhang Yan, he raised his brows and swept his gaze behind him, as if he had already sensed something. Even if the sand was small, he could see it clearly in his eyes without missing a single trace. Sensing that this thing had come with ill intentions, Zhang Yan raised his head to look at the large ball of black cloud that was like fire that was attacking him. However, he had no intention of fighting it head-on. Although he had cultivated a tough body, he did not want to act rashly. Right before the flying sand and fire cloud attacked him, he had already used the true execution technique and secretly left a fake body where he was, while his real body concealed itself and went somewhere else. However, this fake body of his was refined from a drop of his own blood essence, so the appearance that appeared was still his original appearance. Fortunately, the surroundings were filled with the yellow cloud and thick fog formed when the mysterious yellow hand collapsed, so Bao Dingheng and the other two could not see clearly. Moreover, at this moment, there was no one else here apart from Zhang Yan, so it was not difficult to deceive these three people. Just after he escaped, the black cloud and the flying sand collided in just a few breaths' time. It was as if yin and yang lightning clouds had collided, causing a rumbling sound. The sound of wind and thunder was extremely shocking. Zhang Yan, who had already escaped far away, was also surprised. Even with his knowledge, he could not tell what exactly this fire cloud flying sand was. Under the attack of the sand cloud from both front and back, how could the fake body in the middle withstand it? It was instantly swept into it. First, it was burned by the ink-like fire cloud, and its bones and flesh were separated. Then, it was ground by the copper flying sand, and in an instant, it was minced into mush. In just a moment, it had completely disappeared. However, killing it so easily caused Bao Dingheng and Priest Gao to frown in disbelief. Previously, they had seen how fierce and overbearing Zhang Yan was, so how could they not resist at all? There was clearly something strange about this. Even Fang He couldn't believe it. He widened his eyes and said, "Could it be that he has already killed this junior?" At this moment, Zhang Yan didn't care about what they were thinking. He had already concealed himself and quietly flew out of the battle circle. He first observed for a moment and saw that the three of them were standing in the same place as before. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. He coldly smiled and first formed a technique. After the arrangement was completed, he flicked his sleeve and moved closer to Priest Gao. There was a reason for him to look for this person first. This person had the split thunder seal in his hand. The power of this treasure was not small, and it was able to restrain Zhang Yan to a certain extent. Obviously, he was the one who posed the greatest threat among the three. Moreover, Taoist Gao was alone at the moment, and there was no one from the same sect who could help him. Naturally, he would be the first target to be eliminated. Although Taoist Gao didn't lose his vigilance and was secretly on guard, most of his attention was on the thick clouds in front of him. He didn't know that Zhang Yan had already moved behind him, so he wasn't on guard at all. The corner of Zhang Yan's mouth twitched. He stretched out two fingers and pointed forward. Two whistling golden hammers flew out, one fast and one slow, and swept from the left and right. Taoist Gao suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind him. Only then did he realize that something was wrong. He hurriedly moved his body to the side and narrowly avoided a golden hammer. However, even though he was able to dodge this one, another golden hammer struck him from another direction, striking his back with a resounding boom. His bones were instantly fractured, and his internal organs were completely destroyed. Blood gushed out of his mouth and nose in a frenzy, and the light beneath his feet dissipated, causing him to plummet down from the cloud. Zhang Yan was afraid that he wouldn't die. He leaped forward and reached out to catch one of the golden hammers in his palm. With a paw, the hammer fell down and smashed Taoist Gao's head. Bao Dingheng and Fang He saw this scene. Both of them were shocked, and a deep sense of fear filled their hearts. Who would have thought that not only did Li Yuanba not die, but he also used some unknown method to get next to Taoist Gao and kill him? Bao Dingheng felt that at this time, he had used all his talismans and methods, but he still couldn't kill Zhang Yan. Even if Mr. Shi and the morphing Ganoderma were both taken away, he had no choice but to retreat. He said with a trembling voice, "Shitty, this person isn't someone you and I can fight. Why don't we go somewhere else today? It won't be too late to take revenge in the future." For Bao Dingheng's sake, Fang He had just used his talismans and blocked a few fierce attacks from the mysterious yellow hand. He was already exhausted, so retreating at this moment was exactly what he wanted. Thus, he replied, "Shitty is right. This Li Yuanba is really powerful, and his methods are strange and unpredictable. Why don't we lure a few of our fellow Taoists here and then annihilate this thief together?" After the two of them made up their minds, they were about to get up and fly away. However, before they could fly away, they felt that their feet were as heavy as lead. They lowered their heads and opened their eyes. Only then did they realize that they were surrounded by a yellow fog, and it was difficult for them to even move. Suddenly, they heard a loud laugh coming from ahead of them. The yellow mist in the surroundings suddenly rolled like waves, and with a whoosh, it gathered into a ball and gathered together. They saw a huge muddy yellow hand that was 30 meters in size stretching out from below. Only now did the two of them realize that the place they were standing at was right on the palm of the huge muddy yellow hand, and they were instantly scared out of their wits. The mysterious yellow hand stretched out its 5 fingers, and with a flip of its palm, it rolled toward the two of them like a huge wave. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were swallowed up. Only 2 short screams were heard, and there was no sound above the clouds. Zhang Yan stood in the void, shook his shoulder, and retracted the mysterious yellow hand, letting the 2 tattered corpses fall. However, the vigilance on his face did not disappear. He first looked around, then got up and rode the breeze to circle around the forest. After a careful inspection, he was sure that no cultivators had been nearby just now. Only then did he turn back. He had always been decisive, but he did not lack meticulousness and caution. The time he had been fighting with Bao Dingheng and the others until now was not long, but it was not short either. It was difficult to guarantee that no other cultivators happened to pass by during the battle. Therefore, he simply did not use his sword, and only used the mysterious yellow dragon capturing hand and strength path cultivators to fight the enemy. It was for the sake of being prepared. In this way, even if someone secretly spied on him, they would not be able to connect his true identity. After returning to his original place, Zhang Yan's gaze swept over the few corpses on the ground. After a moment of thought, he flicked his sleeve and took out the 9 absorption demon slip. This thing had not appeared for a long time. At this time, it let out a joyful howl. As its body trembled, there was faint celestial music drifting from the sky, and a strange fragrance assailed the nostrils. Then, with a sound, it turned into a brilliant silver rainbow. It circled the dense forest a few times, and it completely absorbed the essence, blood, and remnant souls of the dead cultivators. After it was full, it let out a long and clear cry, and only then did it reluctantly fall into Zhang Yan's sleeve. Zhang Yan swept his eyes over and saw that there were still a few sleeve bags on the ground. He did not stand on ceremony and went up to take them. He looked up at the sky. At this moment, the sky was slightly bright, and it was already the end of the day. He felt that it was not good to stay here for long, so he got up and flew into the sky. After circling in the air, he found an inconspicuous mountain top and flew. At this moment, less than 100 miles away from him, Ho Sanlang was carefully following a green-clothed young man in front of him. Although he was wearing the Ho clan's shadow-shifting treasure robe, which could hide any traces when walking or even flying, he still looked cautious and did not dare to make the slightest mistake. This green-clothed youth had a pair of green eyebrows, a sharp nose, and red lips. He could be considered an elegant and beautiful youth, but his cheeks were suffused with an abnormal pale green color, and his whole body exuded a faint fragrance. Before Ho Sanlang entered the mountain, he had already set his eyes on this person. Although he did not find any traces of Zhang Yan on the mountain, he did not believe that Zhang Yan, who had gone out to search for medicine, would not come here when the news of the emergence of such a good treasure in Mount Qingsuan came out. Because of this, he found a few suspicious people, and after a few rounds of investigation, the person in front of him was the most suspicious. At that time, he pretended to accidentally bump into this person, and took the initiative to talk to this person. He only knew that this person's surname was Feng, and nothing else. After that, he asked around, but no one knew where this person came from. At that time, he had already deduced that this person was most likely Zhang Yan. And now that he had followed this person all the way, he could be sure that this person's appearance in front of him was definitely not his original appearance. However, before he could completely confirm this person's identity, he would not act rashly. Suddenly, the green-clothed young man's footsteps stopped, and his nose twitched a few times. His face revealed a happy expression, and he let out a light laugh. His figure was incomparably fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the depths of the forest. Ho Sanlang hurriedly chased after him, but he was puzzled. Why did this person not get up and fly? Even in the forest, flying over the ground was much faster than walking on 2 feet. Although he could not see the green-clothed young man's figure because of the dense foliage, but following the faint fragrance, he was not afraid that this person would escape. Sure enough, after walking for a few miles, he once again saw this person's figure. The green-clothed young man stood on an open space, and raised his foot to stomp on the ground. He laughed, and said to himself, "Let's see where you can hide this time." He shouted, and suddenly bent down. His palm inserted into the soil, and his entire wrist was submerged. His face revealed a playful expression, and then he slowly pulled his palm out of the ground. Ho Sanlang's eyes suddenly widened. This green-clothed young man's hand was actually holding a Ganoderma in the shape of a human. This scene was too unbelievable. It must be known that this Ganoderma had hands and feet, and when it sensed danger, it would find a place to hide in advance. Although there were thousands of cultivators who entered Mount Qingsuan, Ho Sanlang dared to say that if one did not know the method, they would not be able to find a single Ganoderma even if they were given 3 years. And this green-clothed young man actually did not borrow any magical treasures, and yet he was able to catch this Ganoderma out of thin air. If this news were to spread, it would definitely cause a frenzy. This person is definitely not that Zhang Yan. Ho Sanlang looked at it a few more times, and touched the magical treasure in his sleeve. His heart was restless, and he wondered if he should go forward and snatch the Ganoderma now, or observe in the dark, and wait until he was sure of the young man's strength before making a move. Just as he was hesitating, the green-clothed young man suddenly turned his head, and grinned at him. He said, "Junior, you are very patient. Even with the Ganoderma in front of you, you still refuse to reveal yourself. However, I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't play with you any longer. Hashtag you can see or target equals _blank. Chapter 235. Wu Clan's circle mountain. Zhang Yan walked around a mountain, then found a place and opened up a simple cave abode with his mystic light. Then, he raised his hand, and a dozen rocks of appropriate sizes flew into the cave, each of which was arranged into a stone table and a stone bench. He smiled and slowly entered the cave abode. With a flick of his sleeve, he threw all the sleeves and magic tools he had obtained from Bao Dingheng and the others on the stone table. Among the things left behind by Bao Dingheng and the others, except for some scattered objects, there were only 1 or 2 magic treasures and 2 sword discs that could catch his eye. Except for the disciples of the Yuanyang sect, no one could control these things. Moreover, the sword discs of each disciple were different. They were all given by the elders of the sect since the beginning of their cultivation, and had long been refined to become one with them. Even if they were taken by the disciples of the same sect, they might not be able to use them well, let alone the disciples of other sections. Therefore, when Lan Yuchen's sword discs fell into the forest, Bao Dingheng and Fang He had no intention of retrieving them, and no one paid any attention to them. However, Zhang Yan knew that the reason why the sword discs could transform qi into swords was that there was a wisp of gung exa and metal qi hidden in the discs, so they could carry the spirit and transform the appearance of swords. This qi was one of the 5 elements essence qi he was looking for, so he wanted to explore it. But when he used his spiritual qi to explore it, he was slightly disappointed. The metal qi in these 2 sword discs was mixed and impure. It was obvious that some impurities had been added into them. They could be transformed into sword qi, but if they were used to cultivate the Taishian true light, their grade was too low. But on second thought, Bao Dingheng and Fang He were just ordinary disciples of the Yuanyang sect, so it was reasonable that they could not obtain such pure metal qi. Besides, if the metal qi was really so pure, how could it be unscathed when it fell on him? He shook his head with a smile and threw the 2 sword discs away. Then, he reached out and picked up the iron ruler that had scattered the black-yellow hand to examine it. After looking at it for a while, he found that it was just a high-grade spiritual weapon. Moreover, he needed to chant a spell to use it. Even though its power was extraordinary, it was not practical in a fight. It could be said to be of little value. Therefore, after looking at it for a while, he lost interest and casually threw it into his sleeve. His gaze swept across the area and landed on the thunderclap seal. This treasure was quite powerful, but it had a flaw, and that was that it could only be used within 100 feet. In this way, it would be somewhat useful in a siege, but if it was a one-on-one fight, one could not count on it to be effective. However, when he returned to his sect in the future, he could bestow this treasure to his sect or sell it in the celestial market. Thus, he took it for himself. He picked and chose, using the primordial unity mystic light to grind away those things that seemed useless to him, leaving behind only those that seemed to be of some use. After sorting things out, he found that among the many things, only the red copper flying sand that was half filled with the gourd could be seen to be extraordinary. However, this was not a place for in-depth study, so he put it away first and prepared to investigate it in the future. After everything was taken care of, he took out the human sack and poured it out, releasing Mr. Shi. The old man was unconscious, so Zhang Yan took out a pill and fed it to him. After a while, he slowly woke up. After Mr. Shi opened his eyes, he first saw Zhang Yan, but there was no panic on his face. He slowly turned over and sat up. He looked around and said in a deep voice, "Where is fellow Taoist Bao and his group?" Zhang Yan did not hide anything and said, "I won't hide it from you, Mr. Shi. They have all been killed by me." Mr. Shi was silent for a while, then sighed and said, "Then, what does fellow Taoist need me to do for you?" Zhang Yan nodded inwardly. This Mr. Shi was a sensible person. He knew that Zhang Yan definitely had a reason for sparing him. He smiled and said, "Naturally, I would like to ask Mr. Shi to help me find the one-breath Zoisha." Mr. Shi raised his eyebrows and said with surprise, "Fellow Taoist Li has already obtained a good medicinal Zoisha, are you still not satisfied?" Zhang Yan laughed brightly and said, "I won't hide it from Mr. Shi. Although the shape-shifting medicinal Zoisha is good, it is not what I want. According to what I know, in this Mount Qing Cun, there are medicinal Zoishas that are even better than this." Mr. Shi was slightly moved and couldn't help but look at Zhang Yan. The only thing that could compare to the shape-shifting medicinal Zoisha was the Zoisha ancestor. Although Zhang Yan didn't say it clearly, the meaning behind his words was self-evident. He raised his hand and stroked his beard as if to conceal the ripples in his heart. He said, "If fellow Taoist wishes to find this item, I originally did not have the ability to do so. However, since fellow Taoist has obtained the shape-shifting medicinal Zoisha, I can reluctantly give it a try. Whether it will succeed or not, I am not completely certain." Zhang Yan didn't care and waved his hand. "Mr. Shi doesn't need to worry about success or failure. Originally, when I came to this mountain, I didn't think I would meet Mr. Shi. As the saying goes, do your best and leave the rest to the heavens. Even if you fail, I will not blame Mr. Shi." Mr. Shi glanced at Zhang Yan and his lips moved as if he wanted to say something. Zhang Yan saw his expression and smiled faintly. He said, "If Mr. Shi doesn't feel at ease, I can make an oath that regardless of success or failure, I can let Mr. Shi go after the matter." But Mr. Shi shook his head and said, "I'm not worried about this. This old man is already 150 years old. I don't have much time left. If nothing unexpected happens, this Mount Qing Cun, will be this old man's burial ground." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. A normal clear qi cultivator only had a lifespan of 150 years. In other words, this Mr. Shi's lifespan was reaching its end. No wonder this Mr. Shi was neither servile nor overbearing to Bao Dingheng and the others. So there was this reason behind it. He thought about it and said, "Mr. Shi, if you have something to say, please say it. If I can do it, I will not refuse." Mr. Shi cupped his hands at Zhang Yan and said, "If I find this item, this old man only wants fellow Taoists to promise one thing." Zhang Yan said with a straight face, "Please speak, Mr. Shi." Mr. Shi looked outside the abode and sighed. "Among my descendants, there is a grandnephew with excellent aptitude. It's just that this old man can't teach him. Originally, Bao Dingheng promised to bring him into a sect to cultivate, but now, Zhang Yan understood his intention. He thought for a moment and said with a smile, "This matter is not difficult. I have friendly relations with a few sections. I am willing to introduce Mr. Shi's grandnephew to you." Mr. Shi looked deeply at Zhang Yan and said, "Fellow Taoist Li is indeed not an ordinary wandering cultivator." Zhang Yan only smiled and did not say anything. Mr. Shi looked at the faintly discernible mountain range outside and his eyes also brightened. He said with emotion, "Fine, this old man has been searching for the Zoisha all his life. Now that I'm past my prime, if I can find the Zoisha ancestor and use this matter as the bet of my life, I will have no regrets." Zhang Yan nodded and smiled. Just as he was about to ask for Mr. Shi's grandnephew's name, his expression changed slightly. He stood up and said, "Mr. Shi, please wait for a moment. I'll be right back." He walked out of the abode and looked toward the southeast. He saw a flying boat coming in this direction, but there was a streak of light chasing closely behind it. The person was shouting as if he wanted the person in front to stop. It seemed like it wouldn't take long for the person in front to catch up. There were two people standing on the flying boat, and they both looked flustered. Suddenly, one of them accidentally saw Zhang Yan and shouted, "Fellow Taoist, can you help us two brothers stop this person? I am willing to repay you with a great gift." The person chasing behind was a fierce cultivator. He glanced around and saw that Zhang Yan was alone. He guessed that he didn't have any background, so he didn't say anything. He raised his hand and threw, releasing a red streak of light towards him. Zhang Yan's eyes suddenly turned cold. It seemed like this kind of person who didn't ask for a reason made him a bit angry. He shouted and raised his hand, slapping the light in front of him away. Then, he flicked his sleeve and a golden light flashed. A golden hammer appeared in the air and whizzed towards the person's head. But this person still didn't know what was good for him and still shouted, "I am from the Hong Langwu clan, you dare." How could Zhang Yan have the patience to listen to what he had to say? The golden hammer smashed down on the man's head. Pa! A rain of blood burst out from the man's head. The cultivator died before he could even make a sound. His corpse fell down the 1,000-foot deep ravine. The two people who were running for their lives originally had nowhere else to go. They only saw Zhang Yan as a life-saving straw and randomly asked for help. They didn't really think that he would be able to save them. Who would have thought that Zhang Yan would kill this person with just a raise of his hand? They couldn't help but be stunned. They only came back to their senses after a while and hesitantly controlled the flying boat to come forward. The person who spoke before clasped his hands at Zhang Yan and said, "This one is Su Yangquang, greetings fellow Taoist." He then pointed at the person who looked similar to him and said, "This is my younger brother, Su Yanfu. Thank you for saving us." Zhang Yan glanced at the two of them and saw that they were wearing ordinary clothes. They were only at the first level of the mystic light realm, and they were wandering cultivators. They were probably nothing to the Hong Lang Wu clan, so why would they send people to kill them? He found it strange and asked, "Why is that person chasing after you and your brother?" Su Yangquang smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist might not know this, but the Wu clan has already taken over the Nine Heads Peak. They said that no one is allowed to pick the medicinal mushrooms on the peak, so they are chasing other cultivators away. We two brothers left late, and it just so happened that, before he could finish, Su Yanfu, who was next to him, pulled on his sleeve and stopped him with a look." Su Yangquang continued, "We two brothers couldn't avoid them in time, so we angered the Wu clan and made them send people to chase after us." Su Yangquang sighed and said, "The Wu clan is powerful, and they have nothing to worry about in the Green Inch Mountain. Even if we are killed, there's no one to argue with. What can we do? Why don't we go to the other peaks and try our luck? I just hope that the other clans aren't as tyrannical as them." Although the Green Inch Mountain was tens of thousands of miles away, most of the medicinal mushrooms grew on the 5 peaks. Compared to other places, the medicinal mushrooms here were not only of higher quality, but they were also easier to find. Therefore, most of the cultivators that entered the mountain gathered at the foot of the 5 peaks. Su Yangquang cupped his hands and asked, "I haven't asked for this fellow Taoist's name." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "I am Li Yuanba." "So it's fellow Taoist Li." Su Yangquang cupped his hands again and said, "The person that fellow Taoist just killed was a guest of the Wu clan. If he doesn't return after a long time, I'm afraid that the Wu clan will send people to investigate. Why don't fellow Taoist come with us two brothers and go somewhere else?" Su Yanfu also hurriedly said, That's right. Why don't fellow Taoist travel with us two brothers so that we can look after each other?" He was also a perceptive person. Just now, he saw that Zhang Yan's cultivation was profound, and his clothes were luxurious. The Wu clan's disciples also killed him as they pleased and didn't take it seriously at all. It was obvious that he was not an ordinary loose cultivator, so he wanted to invite him to travel with them. Zhang Yan didn't answer and just looked behind them. Su Yangquang and his brother seemed to sense something and turned back to look. Their expressions changed greatly when they saw that in the distant sky, there were more than 10 streaks of light flying towards them. #target=_blank. Chapter 236. The body of the Zoisha ancestor. The Su brothers thought that these dozen or so rays of light were coming for them, so they couldn't help but panic and tremble all over. But when the group of people came closer, they realized that they weren't from the Wu clan, but were instead a group of loose cultivators who had gathered together for some unknown reason. There were even a few familiar faces among them. However, these people all looked flustered at the moment, as if they had encountered something terrifying. Most of them didn't even look in their direction and just flew past them. Among them, there was a young female cultivator with her hair combed into a ponytail and dressed in a gauze dress with silk ribbons. She was flying on a pink handkerchief. When she saw the Su brothers, a surprised expression appeared on her face. After a brief hesitation, she waved her long sleeves and turned around, shouting in a rather urgent voice, "Why are you still here? If you don't leave now, your life will be in danger." After saying this, she didn't wait for the Su brothers to reply and hurriedly curtsied, chasing after the group of people in front of her. The Su brothers looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Su Yangquang hurriedly turned around and bowed to Zhang Yan, saying, "Brother Li, you see, this Wu clan is very powerful." Before he could finish, Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve and said with a cold expression, "Fellow Taoists, please go. I won't accompany you any longer." After saying this, he didn't even look at the two people and turned around to enter the cave. If it weren't for the Wu clan's guests' arrogant and despotic behavior, attacking him without asking anything, he wouldn't have bothered to care about this. Besides, he still needed to find the Zoisha ancestor, so he naturally wouldn't travel together with these two people. As for whether the Wu clan would come looking for trouble, he didn't care at all. If they were stupid enough to come looking for trouble, he would just kill them. When Su Yangquang saw that Zhang Yan had no intention of responding to them, he was startled. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but his brother Su Yanfu pulled him back and said in a low voice, "Elder brother, there is no need to persuade him. This person's strength far surpasses ours, and he will surely have a way to protect himself. With us two brothers here, if we really fight with the Wu sect, we will only drag this fellow Taoist down." Seeing Zhang Yan's cold attitude, Su Yanfu knew that he would only be annoying if he stayed any longer. His big brother had been cultivating all year round and did not understand the ways of the world. If he continued to speak and angered Li Yuanba, it would not be good. However, it was not good for him to directly persuade him, so he could only change to this euphemism. Su Yanfu suddenly understood and said, "Second brother is right." He respectfully bowed towards Zhang Yan's cave and said loudly, "Fellow Taoist Li, words cannot express our gratitude for your great kindness. Then, we brothers will take our leave first. If fate wills it, we will meet again." Zhang Yan stepped into the cave abode. Mr. Shi was still sitting firmly on the stone bench. Seeing him enter, he stroked his beard and asked, "The Wu clan is powerful. Now that this mountain is still at the foot of Nine Heads Peak, does fellow Taoist Li not want to find a place to hide temporarily?" Zhang Yan chuckled and said, "Why would I be afraid of this Wu clan? Moreover, the 5 peaks of Mount Qingsuan would be occupied by those big clans sooner or later. Unless one went far away, it would be the same wherever one went. One word by word take me." Mr. Shi frowned. "Oh. As far as this old man knows, the Shi and Yan families are not as overbearing as the Wu family." Zhang Yan chuckled coldly and said, "After the Wu family occupied Nine Heads Peak, those rogue cultivators had no choice but to look for the mushrooms elsewhere. This time, there are no less than 10 big and small clans that have come to Mount Qingsuan. If those rogue cultivators go there, they will definitely fight with them for the mushrooms. Just watch, Mr. Shi. It won't be long before the other clans will follow suit and surround the mountain like the Wu family, not allowing others to interfere." Mr. Shi thought carefully and nodded slowly. He sighed and said, "Fellow Taoist is right. However, this old man has calculated that the Zoisha ancestors' hiding place is not outside of the 5 peaks. If that's the case, it will be a little difficult." Zhang Yan did not mind at all. He waved his hand and said in a low voice, "It's fine. Mr. Shi, you only need to look for the mushrooms. As for those who block the way, I will deal with them." He had no interest in these clans blocking and driving away other cultivators, but the Zoisha ancestor was one of the key external ingredients for him to condense his core. If anyone blocked his way, it was equivalent to blocking his great Tao. There was no reason for him to care. He could only use the sword in his hand to kill. Hearing the murderous intent in his words, Mr. Shi's heart trembled. He took a deep breath and said slowly, "If that's the case, if fellow Taoist trusts this old man, then please give me the transformation Zoisha." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Of course I trust Mr. Shi." He took out a porcelain bottle from his sleeve, pulled out the cork and poured the contents out. A wisp of fragrant green smoke came out of the bottle. When it reached the outside room, it slowly shrank down and turned into a palm-sized child. His eyes were filled with tears, lying on the stone table and looking at the two people pitifully. Mr. Shi looked at him for a while and reached out to grab him. The child shivered, then suddenly stood up and kowtowed repeatedly, crying, "Master, please have mercy on this child's cultivation. Please let me go." Hearing the child's pitiful voice, Mr. Shi's hand paused and comforted him, "Don't be afraid. I don't want to take your life. I just want to borrow your blood essence to find the Zoisha ancestor." The child was stunned, then quickly waved his hand and said, "Master wants to find the ancestor? Even if you take this child's blood essence, you won't be able to catch it." Mr. Shi pretended to be confused and said, "Oh? Why is that? If you give me a reason, I won't hurt you." The child quickly said, "Ever since the Taihao school's ancestors sealed the mountain, the ancestor has cultivated for more than 4,000 years. He has already shed his true form and turned into a wisp of pure qi. In a day, he can travel thousands of mountains and rivers. The two masters will never be able to find the ancestor. Mr. Shi smiled and said, "Kid, you've misunderstood me. The Zoisha ancestor's cultivation is unfathomable. Even the current Taihao school's sect master might not be able to catch him. I only want the body that he shed." Xiao Tong bit his finger and said in a weak voice, that won't work. We don't know where the old ancestor hid the body. Even if the people from the Supreme Sky sect came a few times, they couldn't find it. Zhang Yan thought to himself, no matter how precious the Zoisha root was, it could only be used to condense a core. Those who could enter this great void defense formation were at most at the mystic light realm. They were not much stronger than the wandering cultivators. If the Taihao school master was in charge of the formation, he could enter, but as a sect master, why would he do such a thing? Seeing that the child seemed to be hiding something, Mr. Shi wasn't angry. He smiled and didn't probe further. Instead, he started to talk about other things, such as the interesting things that happened when they were young, the endless scenery of the Donghua continent, and the colorful world. The child was simple-minded. Since birth, he had grown up in Mount Qingsuan. Later, after he transformed, the world he saw was only this side of the world. He had never left Mount Qingsuan. In the past, when those cultivators came, he would hide far away and never spoke to anyone. How could he have heard of such things? After Mr. Shi said a few words, he listened with great interest. The fear in his heart gradually disappeared, and his eyes flashed. When he reached the most exciting part, he couldn't help but clap his hands. Zhang Yan stood at the side and held his breath, not saying a word. Since he invited Mr. Shi to search for the Zoisha root, he didn't doubt the person he used and let him handle it. When it was close to noon, Mr. Shi stopped talking and smiled. He said to the child, "Friend, it is fate that we met. Friend Li and I don't want to ruin our cultivation, so we will let you go today." Xiao Tong's face lit up and he exclaimed in surprise, "Really?" Then, he glanced at Zhang Yan timidly. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Since Mr. Shi wants you to leave, I won't stop you. After we leave the mountain, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to come back again. We won't meet again in the future, so go cultivate." Mr. Shi raised his head and looked at Zhang Yan. He nodded slightly, and a hint of approval appeared in his eyes. The little boy sneaked a few glances at the two of them, and then his body flashed. With a ka-chi-lu sound, he disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Zhang Yan and Mr. Shi sat motionlessly and didn't react at all. The cave became quiet, and only the sound of insects and grass rustling could be heard from time to time. About 4 hours later, the two's expression suddenly changed and they smiled. A wisp of clear air floated in from outside and gradually condensed into a figure on the stone table. It was the Zoisha child who had left and returned. The Zoisha child shouted to Mr. Shi, Master, if I am willing to help you find the ancestor's body, would you be willing to take me out of Mount Qingsuan?" After he left, the more he thought about the matters of the mortal world, the more interesting it was, so he turned back halfway. Mr. Shi said, "Aren't you afraid that if you help me, your ancestor will find trouble with you?" The child shook his head and said, "Ancestor once said that this place is blocked by the formation and there are no disasters or tribulations, so the body is of no use to him. As long as the vitality is still there, it won't take more than 10 years to give birth to the body again. It's just that I didn't want the ancestor's body to be taken away for no reason, so I lied to Celestial Master." Mr. Shi and Zhang Yan looked at each other. He smiled and said, "Okay, if you are willing to help me, I can also take you out to see the scenery of the mortal world." When Xiao Tong heard this, he was instantly overjoyed, and his eyes curved into crescent moons as he danced with joy and chuckled. But suddenly, he seemed to have noticed something, and his little face went pale as he held his head and said, "Trouble has come." He looked around and saw that the porcelain bottle that Zhang Yan used to contain him was still on the stone table. He turned into a wisp of clear air and went inside. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. He shook his sleeves and went out of the cave. At this moment, outside the cave, there was a young man dressed in green who was walking on a green cloud. He flicked his sleeves and walked forward in a carefree manner. Behind him, there were several green lights faintly appearing, causing his skin to be reflected in a green color. There was a person beside him. It was Ho Sanlang, who was obediently following beside him with a humble look. The green-clothed young man's nose twitched and he said curiously, "That's strange. I clearly smelled a strong spiritual vigor nearby. Why can't I smell it now? Could it be that someone made the first move?" Ho Sanlang said fiercely, "How dare he fight with the Venerable One? This person deserves to die. I'm willing to teach him a lesson on behalf of the Venerable One." The young man in green waved his sleeves and chuckled, "There's no need. This person is already here." Zhang Yan walked out of the abode and raised his head to look. The young man in green clothes was looking at him as well, and their gazes met before the young man actually roared with laughter and said, "I was wondering who dared to fight me for the treasure. So it's you. Target equals _blank. Chapter 237. An unfathomable origin. Zhang Yan noticed that the green-clothed youth spoke as if he knew him. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and take a closer look at the person. The youth had delicate features and wore an embroidered robe. His skin was as white as a virgin's, and he looked no more than 15 or 16 years old. However, there was a layer of green gas that looked like oil covering his body, adding a bit of evil aura. Ever since Zhang Yan started cultivating, he would never forget anyone he met. He had never seen this person before, and after looking at him for a long time, he found that the other's aura was unfathomable. He couldn't see through the depth of his cultivation, so he asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" The green-clothed youth put his sleeves behind his back and said with a playful smile, "Fellow Li, you don't know me, but I know you, and I know your ability. Since we've met here, if you're willing to submit to me, I can let bygones be bygones for all the previous grievances." When Zhang Yan heard this, his heart moved. The other only called him Fellow Li. Obviously, he didn't know his true identity. He should have recognized him after he changed his appearance, and most likely only found out when he was secretly spying on him. From his words, it seemed that there was some conflict between him and him. His mind turned and he guessed a few possibilities, but he couldn't be sure. Seeing that he didn't answer, the green-clothed youth laughed and waved his hand. Suddenly, the cluster of deep green light on his body suddenly attacked like a torrential downpour. Zhang Yan's feet didn't move, and his expression didn't change. He looked coldly at the green light coming at him and raised his palm. As he raised his sleeve, a gust of violent wind and fierce waves were instantly stirred up, and a whistling sound actually sounded out as it collided with the green light. A bang was heard, and the cluster of green light seemed as if it had been washed away by a rushing wave, and it suddenly swung backwards. However, the green light looked as thin as smoke, but when it was hit by this fierce attack, it actually collapsed into a big ball and didn't dissipate. Zhang Yan's eyes turned cold. Without withdrawing his hand, he stomped on the ground and exerted force on his shoulder. His palm pressed against the green light and he suddenly took a step forward. Boom! The cliff shook and a hurricane suddenly rose from the ground, pressing forward with the momentum of a raging wave. The green light was forced back by the momentum of a mad wolf and was no longer as flexible as before. It immediately shrank back a few feet and shook violently like a candle in the wind, as if it would collapse if a little more force was added. The green-robed young man grinned, as if he couldn't withstand the pressure. His body leaned back in the air, and with a snort, he rolled up his sleeves and withdrew the mysterious light. Then, he raised his eyebrows and reached out to Zhang Yan, shouting, "Fellow Li, stop!" A cold look appeared on Zhang Yan's face. Not only did he not stop, but he also let out a loud roar as he leaped forward and threw a punch at this person. When this punch came out, it exploded out a howl that shook 5 kilometers. The fist pressure surged like a surging wave and shocked clouds, and it suddenly pounced towards the young man. The young man in green felt as if he was drawn into a sticky vortex, and the pressure around him increased greatly. He actually found it difficult to move and couldn't move his body. His face couldn't help but change. He knew that it was a critical moment, and he couldn't care about anything else. He hurriedly released the green light again and gathered it into a ball to protect himself. Zhang Yan punched out and hit the young man in green's shoulder, causing him to stagger. The layer of green mysterious light also dispersed like clouds and mist. With just this slight gap, the young man in green retreated and struggled out of the battle circle. Then, he leaped up and transformed into a green light that fled into the sky. Ho Sanlang, who was standing in the sky, had been paying attention to the battle. At this time, he saw that the young man in green had fallen into a disadvantageous position, and Zhang Yan still wanted to pursue him. He hesitated for a moment, took out 2 rainbow thunder beads, and slashed them towards Zhang Yan. At the same time, the young man in green let out a strange laugh and transformed into a green light that flew towards Ho Sanlang. He took advantage of the momentum and swept Ho Sanlang up. The light was extremely fast, and in an instant, they were dozens of feet away. Boom! The sound of an explosion came from the cliff, and the sky was filled with black clouds of smoke and fire. When Zhang Yan came out of the smoke unscathed, he looked up and saw that the 2 people were already far away. At this time, the young man in green's extremely cheerful laughter faintly came from the sky. He said, "Li Yuanba, I also know your ability, but now is not the time for you and me to fight. If we continue to fight, both of us will suffer. As long as you don't hinder me, I won't trouble you for the time being, ha." As soon as the voice fell, the green streak of light turned a few more times and hid behind a distant peak, completely disappearing without a trace. Zhang Yan watched for a moment, raised his hand in front of him, and couldn't help but frown. When he finally dispersed the green light, he only felt as if thousands of sharp needles had pierced his palm and fingers. At first, there was a feeling of numbness and itchiness, but then it became almost undetectable. He raised his other hand and made a cut on his arm, pulling out a wound that turned his flesh upside down. Then, he circulated his Xian Qi, and 2 strands of green gas that were like living things, but only as long as a human finger, were forced out. He then clenched his fist again, and the wound was healed. He could feel that after this thing entered his body, it could slowly devour the flesh and blood essence. If he hadn't discovered it in time, it would have become a serious problem after a long time. Fortunately, he cultivated an ancient devil art, and didn't need to be watered by external medicines like normal strength cultivation arts. His body was pure and refined, unparalleled among his peers, and he couldn't tolerate the slightest contamination, which was why he was able to discover the anomaly in time. This strand of light was strange and unpredictable, and it was impossible to guard against. If an ordinary cultivator was invaded by it, they wouldn't even know they were being ambushed, so it was definitely not some Xian sect's method. However, this method was somewhat familiar, and Zhang Yan stood on the spot, thinking for a while, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He shook his head, and if he couldn't figure it out, then there was no need to think about it. Finding the Zoisha ancestor was the most important thing at the moment, and everything else could be cast aside. If he encountered this person again, it would only be another battle. His eyes flashed, and he moved his feet, returning to the cave abode. The azure-clothed young man rode the streak of light for over 50 kilometers before he slowed down. He stretched out his hand to touch his shoulder, and he felt waves of pain coming from there. He couldn't help but grimace. Even though he'd already used the profound light to protect himself, he was still hit by Zhang Yan. Even though he wasn't heavily injured, his bones were broken and his flesh was torn. He snorted, and actually took out a 1-chi zoisha from his sleeve, opened his mouth, and swallowed it. He then rubbed his shoulder, and after a while, the injury there disappeared. He licked his lips, and thought to himself, this body's foundation is too shallow, and it's really too weak. Coupled with the suppression of this formation, I can't even use 10 to 20% of my abilities. However, if I can swallow a few more high-grade zoisha, this Li Yuanba might not be my opponent. Oh well, before I succeed, I should avoid this person first. While he was thinking, Ho Sanlang had been observing the young man's expression, and now he asked carefully, "Venerable One, why didn't you kill this person just now?" The green-robed young man snorted. He narrowed his eyes and glanced at Ho Sanlang. Two cold bolts of lightning shot out from his black and white eyes, piercing straight into Ho Sanlang's heart. Ho Sanlang shuddered and immediately shut his mouth. The green-robed young man looked at him, and chuckled, and said, "You asked me why I didn't kill him, and I'll tell you. This Li Yuanba's cultivation is not shallow, and I pity that his cultivation is not easy, so I want to take him under my command. That's why I pretended to be defeated, and took the opportunity to do something to him. With his cultivation, he won't do anything now, but after a year or so, even without me urging him, he will obediently come to me." When Ho Sanlang heard this, he could not help but think of the strange method that the young man had used on him. He secretly hated in his heart, but he did not show it on his face, and flattered, when the Venerable One takes action, it will naturally be successful. The green-robed young man seemed to enjoy such flattery very much, and laughed loudly, and said, "That's not bad. Originally, I didn't have much confidence in dealing with the disciples of the Shi, Yan, and Wu families, and I thought I would have to wait for a few months. But now that you have presented this magic treasure, I no longer have to worry about these juniors." Ho Sanlang's face stiffened. This magic treasure was originally lent to the Ho family by the Shao family, and he originally wanted to use it to find a high-grade medicinal mushroom in Mount Qingsuan. But who would have thought that he would be careless that day, and this person's mysterious light would invade his body? In order to save his life, he had to take the initiative to present this magic treasure. Now that he mentioned it, he could not help but feel his heart drip blood. The green-robed young man's laughter spread far and wide without any scruples, but who would have thought that it would provoke a passing spirit light to turn around and fly in their direction? When it stopped in front of the two again, it was a middle-aged scholar with a wide forehead, black robe, and a long beard. He held a cold dagger in his hand, and it was stained with blood. It was obvious that he had killed someone not too long ago, and he was looking at the two with an unfriendly expression. Ho Sanlang opened his eyes and saw that he recognized this person. He glanced at the green-robed young man and saw that he had a mocking expression on his face, but he had no intention of speaking. Ho Sanlang coughed and took the initiative to speak. "Are you senior brother Wulan?" The middle-aged scholar frowned, looked him up and down, and said, "You recognize me?" Ho Sanlang hurriedly said, "I am under the Ho family of Kang Yin. Previously at the banquet at the Lotus Pond with my ancestor, I have seen senior brother from afar. Until now, I have not forgotten senior brother's grace. So you are under the Ho family." Hearing this, Wu Lan's expression relaxed a little, and he put the dagger behind his back, and said in a low voice, "Why are you still here? Could it be that you did not see the flying letter that the Wu family sent out? On this 9 peaks, other than the people of the Wu family, no one is allowed to pick herbs here, or else they will become the enemy of the Wu family. If it was someone else here, he would not have the patience to speak, and would have already slashed with his sword. But although this Ho family was not a big family, and could not compare to the Wu family, it still had a heritage of nearly 1,000 years. They were both Xianmen aristocratic families, and there was some friendship between the elders, so he had to give them some face. Ho Sanlang hurriedly said, "I have just arrived here, but I did not see it." Wu Lan swung his sleeve, and said with a cold face, "Now that you know, then leave quickly." At this moment, the green-robed young man laughed and a strange light appeared in his eyes. He stroked the back of his hand and said, "Oh, so you're saying that in this 9 Heads mountain, only the Wu clan is left? Target equals _blank. Chapter 238. Whereabouts known the 5 peaks of Mount Green Inch are 1,000 Feet Peak, Pear Blossom Peak, 9 Heads Peak, Ape Nest Peak, and Broken Saddle Peak. Due to the protection of the Great Void Defense Formation, there were no natural disasters in this place. Every mountain peak had its own beautiful scenery. The mountains were covered with lush forests, waterfalls, and deep ravines. No one knew which one was the hiding place of the Ganoderma. Since the thousands of cultivators entered Mount Green Inch, more than half a month has passed. Just as Zhang Yan expected, after the Wu clan surrounded the mountain, the Shi clan and the Yan clan occupied Pear Blossom Peak and 1,000 Feet Peak respectively. The remaining 2 peaks were occupied by a dozen smaller clans, pushing out the vagrant cultivators. However, even though most vagrant cultivators are afraid of the Wu clan, the Shi clan, and the Yan clan, when facing the disciples of the smaller clans, many do not give face. Thus, the 2 sides often fight for the Ganoderma. During these days, no less than 100 people have died. Zhang Yan was sitting cross-legged on a bluestone with his eyes closed in meditation. His sleeves were hanging down from his knees. About 30 meters in front of him was a cave that emitted the fragrance of orchids. At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard coming from within. He couldn't help but open his eyes and look over. Mr. Shi walked out of the cave with his walking stick in his hand. These days of running around, the white hair on his head had increased by the day, but he was still full of vigor and energy. The Ji child sat on the old man's shoulder, looking at Zhang Yan with some uneasiness. General Shi shook his head at Zhang Yan and said, "Sorry to disappoint you, brotherly. This is another empty cave." Zhang Yan stood up and smiled without a care. He said, "Don't worry. If there is nothing here, let's go to the next place." According to the Ji Tong, the Zoisha ancestor had wandered through these 5 mountains when he cultivated, so he'd left behind an abode in each of them. Moreover, it was very likely that the shell he'd shed was hiding in one of these abodes. However, these caves were all hidden in the mountains. It was difficult for outsiders to find them. Thanks to the Ji Tong's guidance, he was able to search them one by one. Zhang Yan was not in a hurry. If he couldn't find it in one place, he would search another. Even if he couldn't find it after searching all 5 peaks, he would just be going back to his original plan. He wouldn't lose anything. General Shi looked around and saw no signs of destruction. He asked curiously, "I've been in the cave for 10 days, why hasn't the Shi clan done anything?" Qianren Peak had been taken over by the Shi clan. He had thought that Zhang Yan, who was guarding the entrance of the cave, would have a good fight. However, it looked like everything was peaceful. Zhang Yan chuckled and said, "You're worrying too much. Think about it, this 1,000-feet peak is 1,000 miles wide, where would the Shi clan find so many people to look after it?" Zhang Yan chuckled and said, "General Shi is worrying too much. This 1,000-feet peak is 1,000 miles wide. How could the Shi clan find so many people to look after it?" Earlier, he had already clearly seen that there were only a few dozen Shi clan members on this trip. Now, they had to search for medicinal mushrooms within a 1,000-mile radius of the mountain. How could they possibly capture everyone who had entered the mountain? It was just that the rogue cultivators were afraid of the Shi clan and didn't dare to come. Zhang Yan's group only had 2 people. They were like a drop in the ocean in this mountain range. The possibility of bumping into them was even less. He stayed here for 10 days and no one came to disturb him. General Shi chuckled and said, "It's good to have less trouble. Let's not waste time. Let's go to the next place." Zhang Yan said, "Okay." He shook both of his sleeves and there was a breeze under his feet. It wrapped around Mr. Shi and the child and flew up into the sky. When they were above the clouds, he looked at a majestic peak that seemed to have been split in half. He said, "The nearest place to this place is Mount Duan. Let's go there first." At this time, he was only riding on the wind, so his speed was not very fast. It took him several hours to arrive at the foot of Broken Mountain. The child pointed at a valley in front of them that was filled with peach blossoms and shouted, "Masters, have you seen that boulder? Ancestor's abode is right under that boulder." Zhang Yan looked over and saw a majestic boulder standing in the deep valley. Even the dense forest with leaves and branches couldn't hide its momentum. However, at this moment, there were sword lights flying in front of the valley, and there were shouts coming and going. Obviously, there were people fighting fiercely there at this time. Zhang Yan's eyes swept across the valley and said to Ji Tong, "There are a lot of people over there, hide yourself first." This little boy was also clever and clever. As soon as he heard the question he uttered an "oh." He flipped his body over and found Shi Gong's sleeve, and in a flash his shadow disappeared. At this time, The fierce battle in front of the valley was in a hurry, and one side was already in danger. There were only a few people left who could barely hold on, and they were about to lose. The leader of the other group was a purple-robed Taoist. He was standing at the side watching the battle, but he noticed Zhang Yan and Shi Gong and immediately looked over with a vigilant expression. He gave a look to the person beside him. A gray-robed Taoist who was riding on a bronze bird approached them cautiously. He cupped his hands towards Zhang Yan and said, "Fellow Taoists, if you are also here to look for Ganoderma in this valley, then please stay here for the time being. My fellow Taoists are fighting with the D clan, and the outcome has not been decided yet. Please leave quickly, lest you too are accidentally injured. I'm afraid it won't be good." Although he seemed to be speaking politely, there was a hint of deterrence and warning hidden behind his words. It was also because he saw that Zhang Yan's body was majestic, and when he flew, he knew at a glance that Zhang Yan was not an ordinary cultivator. There were still a few powerful enemies on his side, so he didn't want to casually cause trouble. Zhang Yan said, "I came for something. It has nothing to do with you." The gray-robed Taoist was a hot-tempered one. Relying on the fact that he had more people on his side, he was confident. He snorted and waved his hand, summoning a magic sword in front of him. It turned into a streak of rainbow light and flew around. He shouted coldly, "Fellow Taoists, please leave. If you recklessly barge in, I'm afraid your lives will be in danger." Zhang Yan saw that this person was only at the first level of the mystic light realm. His aura was mixed and impure. It was obvious that he cultivated a low cultivation method. Zhang Yan was too lazy to argue with this person. He grabbed General Shi's arm and said, "General Shi, follow me." He leaped forward and brought along a gust of wind. He brought General Shi into the depths of the valley. This gray-robed Taoist didn't know what was good for him. He snorted and used a spell. Instantly, the sword light shook and slashed down. Who would have thought that when the rainbow light fell into the raging storm, it didn't even stir up the slightest wave. Instead, he suddenly felt his chest tighten, as if he had been fiercely hit by a giant battering ram. He couldn't help but let out a wah sound as he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky. At this moment, the purple-robed Taoist leader had already surrounded the last disciple of the D clan. The people behind him also had their swords and magic treasures in the air. They pointed down and were about to kill this person. However, at this moment, Zhang Yan just happened to charge over. Everyone was shocked, and one of them instinctively slashed down with the magic sword he was controlling. As soon as he did that, it seemed to be the start. The surrounding people also began smashing their flying swords at Zhang Yan. Only the sound of metal colliding could be heard, and for a moment, sparks flew. Zhang Yan seemed to be completely unaware of it, and anyone who blocked his path was directly knocked to the ground by him. Their bodies were twisted, and they were unable to get up again. Seeing that the situation was not good, the rest of the people quickly moved out of the way. They could only see the violent gale rushing towards the depths of the valley. Everywhere it passed, trees fell and leaves danced in the air. Unexpectedly, a path had been carved out. Seeing this, everyone present was dumbfounded, and they were extremely shocked. The D clan disciple originally thought that he had lost his life, yet he suddenly noticed that the people surrounding him had dispersed, causing him to be overjoyed in his heart. He bit the tip of his tongue right away and urged his magic energy with all his might before transforming into a streak of light and fleeing. The purple-robed Taoists secretly thought that it was not good. They were originally here to stop the D clan's disciple because of someone else's request. If one of them escaped, it would be bad. So he hurriedly shouted, "Junior brothers, quickly follow me to chase after him. We must not let this person escape." He was about to jump, but at this time, someone rushed up and pulled his sleeve. He said angrily, "Senior brother, let me deal with the bad guy." The purple-robed Taoist glared at him and scolded, "Bastard! Do you want to die? If you have the strength, hurry up and chase the D clan's disciple back." Zhang Yan hurt several people in the blink of an eye. The momentum made him secretly shocked. He thought that it was good that Zhang Yan didn't come to find trouble with him. If he provoked him again, wouldn't he be courting death? At this moment, the D clan's disciple was already far away. He didn't have time to scold him anymore. He hurriedly rushed into the clouds with the conveyance light. Behind him, there were also a few scattered lights rising from the ground and followed him into the sky. After a while, they disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan rushed all the way into the valley. Not long after, he arrived under the huge stone. He stopped and stood firmly. But after a few glances, he didn't feel surprised. It turned out that the surroundings were barren. There were only jagged mountain rocks and there were not even a few weeds. Where was the cave abode? General Shi patted his sleeve and said gently, "You finally came out. Take a look at this place. Is it right?" The Ji child popped his head out from his sleeve. His dark eyes took a few glances and his eyes lit up. He pointed down and said, "It is here. Master, please take a look. The door of the cave abode is here." Both of them looked down and realized that there was a hole that was only the size of a chopstick under their feet. However, it was really too small. It was not a place that normal cultivators could enter. The Ji child leaped down from General Shi's shoulder and looked up. "Masters, this cave abode is winding and there are many detours. Moreover, it is thousands of feet underground. Please wait on the ground. Let me go down and take a look. If old ancestor's body is here, I will immediately come up and tell you." General Shi patted his head lightly and said, "If there is danger, don't take the risk. Come up quickly. We can find another way down." The Ji child responded. He turned his body and turned into a wisp of clear air and entered the hole. General Shi stroked his beard and said, "If it wasn't for this Ji child's help, I don't know how much effort I would have had to put in to find this place." Zhang Yan nodded slightly in agreement. The two of them waited for less than an hour. Clear air came out from the hole. The Ji child had returned. General Shi hurriedly asked, "Child, how is it?" The child raised his head and puffed out his chest as if he was asking for credit. He said in a clear voice, "Master, I have found out that the body of the ancestor is underground." General Shi's face lit up. "Really?" Xiao Tong nodded his head and said, "Of course there is no mistake. However, the two of you must hurry up." Zhang Yan was surprised. "What do you mean?" Ji Tong frowned, bit his finger, and said, "When Xiao Tong was scuttling through the cave, I heard someone controlling some kind of strange beast on the other side of the mountain wall. It's digging its way into the cave. I'm afraid it won't be long before it finds the location of this cave. Target equals _blank. Chapter 239. Whose home did the Ganoderma fall? When Zhang Yan heard the child's words, his eyes flashed. He immediately took out the vermilion bird tablet talisman that Fu Yuqing gave him that day and handed it to Mr. Shi, saying, "Mr. Shi, this item can control an immortal bird's soul essence. It's enough to fight against a third-layer mystic light realm cultivator. Take this and hide somewhere, I'll go down and find the Ganoderma ancestor's body." Mr. Shi also knew that he couldn't waste any more time. If he lost the Ganoderma ancestor, it would be difficult to find it again. He didn't refuse and took the talisman, saying solemnly, "Be careful, fellow Taoist Li." After saying that, he didn't hesitate and immediately picked up the child, mounted his mystic tool, and left. Seeing that he had left, Zhang Yan clapped his hands and scattered several talisman in the surroundings. Then, he shouted loudly and summoned the black-yellow hand above his head. He swept it down and pushed away a large handful of soil. After a few rounds, he opened up a hole that he could enter. He leaped inside and waved the black-yellow hand repeatedly, breaking rocks and opening up a path along the way. He didn't stop and rushed into the depths of the cave. At this moment, on a mountain peak 100 miles away from them, the two brothers, Pan Qing and Pan Yang, were sitting cross-legged on a pine branch. Beneath their feet was a large hole that was dug up by the soil. In the depths of this cave, there was a strange beast covered in black scales and had a sharp conical head that dug through the ground. Although it was moving underground, its speed was extremely swift, and it wasn't much slower than the beasts that dashed on land. Pan Qing praised, "This southern flower sect's black jade carp horn is really useful. It can dig through the ground like it's rotting wood. Now, no matter where the Ganoderma is hiding, it can't escape from us two brothers." Pan Yang shook his head instead and said, "Unfortunately, it's still inferior to Yen Yuyo's black general. When it traverses the belly of the mountain, it can truly be said to travel 1,000 miles in a single day. How many of the herbs in the mountain can escape from her hands? Although the medicinal mushrooms have yet to transform, they still need to be attached to their roots to absorb spiritual energy. Although they usually hide underground, it is not impossible to find them." This black jade carp horn was a spiritual beast tamed by a Taoist of the Southern Flower sect. His original purpose was to search for an underground abode of immortals, but he didn't expect that it would also have such a miraculous effect when searching for spiritual items. Coincidentally, the Pan brothers were related to this person, so he brought one over for them to search for medicinal mushrooms. Unfortunately, it wasn't easy to tame this beast, and the Taoist only possessed 4 or 5 of them. Besides the one in their possession, the rest had been bought by Yen Yuyu, who'd obtained the information from an unknown source. Pan Qing smiled bitterly and said, "The Yen clan is also a large clan in the southeast. There are only 2 of us, so how can we compare to them?" Among the 3 herbs used to congeal the Dan, this high-quality Wenqi zoisha has always been difficult to find. In these 3 years, as long as I can catch a dozen or so medicinal zoishas, this trip will not be in vain. Pan Yang also nodded and said, "This time, for the sake of that silver bamboo talisman, the 2 of us have thrown away all our savings for many years. If we can find more medicinal zoishas, the rest of the herbs used to congeal the Dan can be considered settled." Pan Qing still wanted to speak, but at this moment, he suddenly felt the talisman in his hand buzz and vibrate. He couldn't help but ask curiously, why is this black jade carp horn heading into the mountain? He wasn't worried that this strange beast would escape. The talisman in his hand contained the beast's blood essence and a wisp of its soul, so no matter where it ran, he would be able to detect its whereabouts. At this moment, he felt that this black jade carp horn was madly drilling into the belly of the mountain. Pan Yang straightened his upper body and guessed with a burning gaze, could it be that it found something good? Just at this moment, a wisp of spiritual energy suddenly emerged from the mud hole beneath their feet. This extremely dense with spiritual energy rushed up, causing the 2 of them to be stunned for a moment. Then, they both greedily sucked in a breath of air at the same time, their faces revealing a shocked expression. After a while, the 2 brothers came back to their senses and looked at each other, immediately knowing that they must have found something extraordinary. Pan Qing's face showed a slight excitement, saying, "Second brother, this thing." Pan Yang slightly calmed the agitation in his heart. His eyes flashed a few times, but his face showed a cautious expression, saying, "Elder brother, this thing is so rich in spiritual energy, it may be one of the legendary medicinal zoishas. This matter must not be leaked." Pan Qing didn't hear the deeper meaning in his words and only nodded, saying, "Yes, yes, it should be so." Pan Yang helplessly looked at his elder brother and simply made it clear. He pointed his mouth towards the outside and said, "What I mean is, those 2 people," he made a cutting motion with his hand. Pan Qing came to his senses and lowered his head in thought. He said in a low voice, "Good, these 2 people are an eyesore. Let's do as second brother says, I will go and do it myself." "No." Pan Yang stopped him and shook his head, saying, "Senior brother should wait here and block the acupuncture point to prevent others from finding out. I will go and deal with these 2 people." Pan Yang laughed, saying, "That's fine." Although these 2 people come from a small sect, their minds are very flexible. If we are not careful, they will escape. I have never been good at disguising myself, so I don't want to overreach myself. Second brother, you are meticulous and won't reveal any flaws, so I will leave this matter to you. Since Cheng Hao and He Ren-xian parted on bad terms with Kushoujuan at the banquet that day, they came to join the Pan brothers. Because the Pan brothers still needed these two people, they treated them amiably on the surface. At this moment, they were patrolling outside to prevent others from spying on them. However, they also felt that the wood's spiritual energy in this area was flourishing. Their knowledge was not as vast as the Pan brothers, so they only thought that they had found some high-grade medicinal zoysias. Cheng Hao showed an envious expression, saying, "These two senior brothers are quite good, actually thinking of using the black jade carp horn to find a medicinal herb." He Ren-xian also agreed, "That's right. Who would have thought that these two senior brothers would have such strange beasts in their hands? This time, we've made the right decision. I believe that if we do our utmost to help these two senior brothers, they won't treat us unfairly when the time comes." Cheng Hao clapped his fist and repeatedly said, "That's right, that's right." As the two were talking, they saw Pan Yang smiling and waving at them. Thinking that he was asking for their help, they didn't suspect anything and hurried over with smiles on their faces. Pan Yang waited for the two to stand in front of him, the smile on his face unchanged, but he said, "My eldest brother has found a high-grade medicinal zoysias, but there is an inconvenience that requires the two of you to help." This matter, as he spoke, he deliberately lowered his voice, causing Cheng Hao and He Ren-xian to lean forward, looking as if they were listening attentively. Who would have thought that at this time, Pan Ming's expression would suddenly become serious? He raised his hand, and a thick sand-like profound light suddenly flew out from the top of his head, brushing down on the two people. Cheng Hao and He Ren-xian were caught off guard by his sudden attack, but the two of them were used to traveling in the outside world, so they each carried a protective jade talisman. As soon as this profound light came down, two treasured lights flew up to block it, but this profound light was too thick and muddy, and the treasured lights only flashed for a moment before disappearing. The two people also reacted, shouting in unison, and hastily retreated. Pan Ming, however, made a hand sign, and the profound light suddenly spread outwards, like a curtain being opened. In a flash, it completely covered everything within a radius of several dozen feet, and then turned into endless yellow sand that rolled downwards. The two people were involuntarily sucked into it, and after two dizzying turns, they were turned into two piles of bloody mud, and even their origin spirits couldn't escape. Pan Yang's expression was normal, and he withdrew the profound light. He turned back to his original position, and nodded to Pan Qing, who was waiting there. Pan Qing's expression relaxed, and he laughed, "Good, then we don't have to worry about a third person finding out about this." At this time, the 9 peaks were already littered with corpses, and the dead were all Wu clan's disciples and servants. Above the clouds, there were still 2 people who were fighting endlessly. And the one who had the upper hand was the green-clothed youth of unknown origin. Above his head, there was a cloud of light and mist, and it was more than 600 feet in size, floating in the air. There was also the faint sound of thunder, and green blades were flying in the air, and the momentum was extremely magnificent. Opposite him, Daoren had messy hair, a pale face, and was gasping for breath. It was obvious that he was at the point where he was at the end of his life. The green-clothed youth casually pointed forward, and the profound light above his head trembled, and a ball of green light rushed down. That Doran's eyes widened in anger, and he shouted, "You demon, my Wu clan swears to avenge today's blood feud." He clapped his hand, and a spirit talisman flew into the sky, but he was hit by the green light, and immediately died, and his soul disappeared, falling from the sky. The green-clothed youth looked at the spirit talisman that had already disappeared, but he laughed disdainfully, and said, "What is the Wu clan? Once I obtain the real body and avoid the great calamity, I will not care about the 12 mysterious clans of the southeast." He laughed coldly, pressed the cloud down, and with a wave of his hand, he grabbed the Taoist's sleeve into his palm. Then, he took out a medicinal mushroom, raised his head, and swallowed it. After standing there for a moment with his eyes closed, the green gas above his head seemed to have thickened. Not far away, there was the sound of footsteps. Ho Sanlang looked at the green-clothed youth's face, and carefully walked over. He held up a sleeve with both hands, and respectfully presented it, saying, "Venerable One, the Wu clan has been searching for a total of 5 medicinal mushrooms. Among them, there is no superior medicinal mushroom, and now they are all here." For the past half a month, he had followed the green-clothed youth around the mountain, and he had seen with his own eyes how easily this person found more than 10 medicinal mushrooms. As the number of medicinal mushrooms he consumed increased, the green gas on the green-clothed youth's body became purer. Until today, he had killed all the Wu clan cultivators on the Nine-Head Mountain. Compared to half a month ago, he was much more powerful. The azure-clothed youth stretched out his hand and took the sleeve pouch. He nodded in satisfaction and said, "You've done well. I won't treat you shabbily once I succeed." Ho Sanlang's face showed that he was flattered, and he said gratefully, "Thank you for your kindness, Venerable One." The azure-clothed young man couldn't help but roar with laughter when he saw him like this, but his laughter stopped abruptly. He seemed to have noticed something, and his nose twitched repeatedly. In the end, he frowned and revealed a shocked and angry expression as he said in his heart, "Shit, I wonder which reckless person actually came into that abode. I originally intended to wait for a year or so before looking for that body, but now it's impossible. He really deserves to die. If that body is damaged in the slightest, it will ruin my plans." He did not have time to think about anything else. With a loud shout, the green energy under his feet surged, and in a split second he and Ho Sanlang soared into the sky, flying rapidly toward Broken Mountain. Hashtag you can see or, target equals, _blank. Chapter 240. The 1,000-year-old Ganoderma in my hand, a cluster of true fire to remove impurities, Part 1. On this trip to Mount Green Inch, Pan Qing and Pan Yang were well aware that they would meet many experts of the same generation, so they had made a lot of preparations in advance, even bringing a few protective array flags with them. After knowing that there was a spiritual object hidden underground, the two of them worked together to set up a formation for fear that others would covet it, and placed a restriction talisman on each of the formation entrances. After about an hour, they just now finished setting up the 63 array flags. As soon as the formation was complete, a ray of light rose up into the air, rising up to 100 feet and sinking down to 1,000 feet, protecting this area like a lump of iron. This formation was called the 7-9 interlocking formation, and it was capable of condensing the earthly chi and spiritual energy within a radius of 2.5 kilometers into one spot. Even if someone came to attack, it would be impossible to do anything to them if they didn't possess a top-notch magic treasure that could instantly destroy the formation. Although they had set up the formation, Pan Qing sighed and said, "Why do I feel a little uneasy in my heart?" Pan Yang's heart also felt an inexplicable sense of irritation, and he raised his voice a little and said with a slightly hoarse voice, "Elder brother is too sensitive. After we take the spiritual object, we only need to quickly leave. Who would know about this?" Pan Qing looked at his second brother in surprise, nodded and said, "Perhaps elder brother is worrying too much." Wait, Pan Yang was a cautious person after all, and after thinking for a while, said, "Elder brother's words are somewhat reasonable. I ask elder brother to stay here and guard the formation. Give the talisman of the carp horn to younger brother will go find the spiritual object." Pan Qing was not a person with his own opinions, so he said without hesitation, "Then so be it." He handed the talisman to Pan Yang, and the latter slightly calmed his mind, turned around and leapt into the mud hole under his feet. Pan Qing sat cross-legged on a treetop, closed his eyes and began to adjust his breathing. After about the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Pan Qing suddenly raised his head and opened his eyes, seeing a green cloud coming from the horizon, but in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. The green-robed young man stood on the green cloud. His gaze was like a flash of cold lightning as he swept his gaze downwards. Even though much of the wood's spiritual essence had been concealed by the formation, in his eyes, it was still bright and dazzling like the blazing sun in the night. He snorted and rushed down. When the 7 and 9 chain array below sensed that someone was coming, it shrouded the area with multicolored light. Seeing this scene, a look of disdain appeared on the young man's face. Without saying a word, he drove the green clouds above his head to descend. Who would have thought that the clouds would transform into specks of cloud light, layer upon layer, like the dense scales of a tile? In between the clouds, a talisman's cloud pattern appeared. No matter how hard the green clouds tried to hit it, it didn't move at all. Pan Qing originally saw that the green-robed young man was coming with a menacing aura, so he was wary and nervous in his heart. Now that he saw that it was only so-so, he couldn't help but mock. Where did this idiot come from? Does he think that my 7 and 9 chain array is so easy to break? The green-robed young man had rushed here and wasted a lot of time. He was anxious, afraid that the body would be taken away, so he acted hastily. Hearing this, he couldn't help but become angry and shouted, "Ignorant junior, do you think that this formation can stop me?" He was also angry in his heart. With a wave of his hand, he shook out an item from his sleeve. This item appeared in the air. It had eyes in the front and back, a sharp head and tail, and a belly like a fish's belly. On it, there were black and white interweaving scales. When it was illuminated by the blazing sun, it caused a ripple of light. After it extended its body, it shook its head and tail, and pecked at the defensive formation. This treasure was called the 5-spirit white carp shuttle. It was a profound weapon that originally belonged to the Shao clan. Because Zhang Yan fought against 100 people on the open sea by himself, the Shao clan suspected that he had a powerful magic treasure to protect himself, so they lent it to the Ho clan to use. After this item reached Ho Sanlang's hands, it was given to the green-robed young man. This treasure was refined from 5 kinds of spiritual objects, and it secretly conformed to the way of yin and yang. It specialized in destroying magic treasures and formations. At this moment, it drilled into the defensive formation, and it easily drilled in without any obstruction. Just like after it entered the formation, the 2 eyes in the front and back of the treasure let out a roar of angry waves. It was like a funnel sinking sand, or a tornado sucking in water, and it sucked in all the spiritual energy in the area. This formation lost the spiritual energy to fill it, and it was like a giant tree losing its roots, or a tired bird losing its nest. In just a moment, the multicolored light dimmed. The green-robed young man sneered, and with a shake of his body, the green cloud on top of his head descended again. There was a loud noise, and as the branches and leaves fell, the formation was broken. Pan Qing didn't expect this person to be so powerful. In a panic, he took out a bright and clean jade bead, and with a wave of his hand, a golden light like a bronze bell covered his body. How could the green-robed young man be willing to be entangled with him here? Impatient, he drove the 5-spirit white carp shuttle to attack. The treasure only pecked at the golden light, and it broke through like thin cloth. After entering the inner circle, it still wasn't willing to give up. With a swing of its head and tail, it turned into a swift stream of light and pierced through Pan Qing's heart. Pan Qing's eyes widened, and his face was full of disbelief. He clutched his chest and took 2 steps back. Looking at the jade bead that had already been crushed into powder in his hand, he let out a loud cry and fell backwards. The green-robed young man beckoned with his hand, and the spirit shuttle reluctantly turned around in the air before returning to his hand. He coldly snorted at Pan Qing's corpse, and said, "A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Overestimating your own strength." With a flick of his sleeve, he turned into a green light and flew towards the mud cave. At this moment, in another cave, Zhang Yan was driving the black-yellow hand to cut open the mountain, and dig the ground. His journey down was very smooth, and there were no obstructions along the way. About half an hour later, a smooth stone wall appeared in front of him, and the dense wood spiritual energy seemed to rush towards him, seeping into his lungs. Knowing that he had found the right place, Zhang Yan couldn't help but feel excited. With a loud shout, he charged forward, and with a loud rumble, he smashed a hole in the wall, and rushed into a cave dwelling. When he looked up, he saw that the cave dwelling was about 1,000 feet wide, and looked like a hollowed-out piece of rock. Water vapor could be faintly seen inside, and it looked like a jade bead in an icy mist, sprinkling with rain and dew. Right in the middle of the room, there was a medicinal zoysia the length of an adult's arm. Its crown was like an umbrella, and the Zoisha's body was curvy and exquisite like a beauty's, graceful and graceful. At first glance, it looked like a young woman holding an umbrella, faintly discernible in the mist. Zhang Yan took a few glances at it, and praised, "What a beautiful Zoisha." The one-chi Zoisha was also known as the beauty Zoisha, but it didn't look like that in the illustrated handbook. At first, he didn't understand what it meant, but now that he had a closer look, it seemed that only the shell of the Zoisha ancestor could live up to its name. His eyes swept around, and he discovered that other than the shell of the Zoisha ancestor, there were more than a dozen high-grade medicinal Zoishas, all of them clinging to several thick roots, exuding a chilly aura like clear water in the cave. His gaze followed, and he saw that there were many holes on the ceiling, and dozens of large tree roots were hanging down from these holes. These medicinal Zoishas were absorbing the essence chi from these roots. With the concealment of this hidden cave dwelling, and the fact that this place was over 1,000 feet above the ground, these medicinal Zoishas could cultivate here with peace of mind, not worrying about being captured. But now, they had grown so stupid that their hands and feet were as small as their little toes, and they had long lost the ability to escape. Right at this moment, Zhang Yan's expression changed. On the other side of the cave-dwelling spirit, there was a gap about the height of a man, and a deep tunnel that led to an unknown place. It must have been dug out by the strange beast. With his hearing, he could already hear the rumbling sounds coming from inside, as if someone was fighting fiercely inside. Zhang Yan smiled faintly, and with a wave of his sleeves, he collected all the medicinal Zoishas into his bag. He then picked up the Zoisha ancestor and leaped up, flying back the way he came. This Zoisha ancestor was only a shell now, and he couldn't leave the ground for more than an hour, or it would definitely die. Thus, he didn't dare to tarry, and only wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Just as he left, he saw a flash of green light, and the green-robed young man rushed in from the opposite gap, his body covered in blood. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes, and when he looked around, he found that the cave dwelling was already empty. Not far away from him, there was a hole that had been broken open. Obviously, someone had arrived before him. Instantly enraged, he let out a loud roar and chased after the intruder. Although Zhang Yan's descent into the ground was slow, his return to the surface was extremely fast, and it didn't take long for him to see the sun again. When he heard the commotion behind him, his face darkened, and he quickly turned around, throwing out a punch. The green-robed young man didn't know that the person in front of him was Zhang Yan, and thought that there was no one here who could be his opponent. But when he saw a strong gust of wind pressing down on him like a mountain, and a fist growing bigger and bigger in front of him, he was shocked. In a hurry, he let out a shout and blew out a wisp of green gas from his mouth and nose. With a loud bang, the mountain cracked open, and the green-robed young man was smashed back into the ground by this punch. Blood spurted out from his mouth, and he couldn't even tell how many bones in his body were broken. Fortunately, this was only a temporary body, so although the pain was unbearable, it wasn't enough to take his life. However, the anger in his heart couldn't be quelled, and he shouted, "Li Yuanba, you dare to steal my thing, I swear I won't rest until you die." Zhang Yan pulled back his fist, and the needle-like feeling invaded his body again, trying to penetrate his meridians and apertures. He raised his brow, and by using his Xian Gong, he was able to stop this strange qi. When he heard the green-robed young man's voice, his eyes narrowed. He wanted to kill this person right now and end this trouble, but after thinking about it, he gave up on the idea. This green-robed young man had a lot of tricks up his sleeves, and he still hadn't seen through them. If he really fought with this person, the outcome wouldn't be decided in a short period of time. Now that he had the Zoisha ancestor in hand, it was even more inconvenient for him to stay here, so he said loudly, "I have no time to accompany you today. Take care, I'll see you in the future." After that, he let out a long laugh, waved his sleeves, and left. A gust of wind blew by, and he was already in the sky. Right now, it wasn't convenient for him to find Mr. Shi, so he simply chose a direction and flew away. After traveling for 1,000 miles, he suddenly felt one of the apertures in his body suddenly jump. He was startled at first, but then he was overjoyed. He didn't care about anything else, and with a shake of his body, he flew in the southwest direction for 100 miles, found a stream, and instantly sank to the bottom of the riverbed. He sat down in a lotus position, and with his mind focused, he began to use his Xian Gong. Target equals _blank. Chapter 241. Zhang Yan looked into his body, and on top of the rippling profound light that floated in his qi sea, there was a true flame that was as small as a grain of rice burning. This true fire was formed from the essence of the mystic light realm, and it was the result of his cultivation after breaking through to the third level of the mystic light realm. At this moment, the trembling acupoint in his body seemed to have been chiseled through. It was emitting a ray of light, and a wisp of yang qi was slowly separated from the acupoint. The true fire trembled and slowly absorbed the wisp of yang qi as if it was spinning silk from a cocoon. Zhang Yan circulated his xian qi, and in just a few breaths, this wisp of yang qi was absorbed, and the true fire became stronger. If he could cultivate this true fire to a high level and refine it, he would be able to combine the 9 medicines and refine a golden pill. However, the fire right now wasn't enough, so he needed to place this true fire into the 36 acupuncture points in his body and slowly circulate it. Once it burned through the acupuncture points, he would draw out a wisp of yang qi to nourish his body until it was like a bright flame. Just now, he had reached the late stages of the mystic light realm. The more acupuncture points a cultivator burned through, the stronger the true fire would be, and the more successful they would be in refining their golden pill. Normally speaking, it was already not bad for normal cultivators to burn through more than half of their acupuncture points. This was because the more they cultivated, the harder it was to open the acupuncture points. At the start, it would only take a month or so to burn through one acupuncture point, but towards the end, it would take 10 years or even dozens of years. Mystic Light Realm cultivators only had a lifespan of 300, and not everyone could form a golden pill. Where would they find the time to open all the acupuncture points? Cultivators that could absorb all the yang qi in the 36 acupuncture points were all extremely talented and would only appear once in 1,000 years. Just now, the acupuncture points in Zhang Yan's body were beating. This was the sign of the first acupuncture point being burned through by the true fire. Seeing that his cultivation was improving without him knowing, he was happy. He moved the true fire and placed it into the next acupuncture point to slowly refine it. He slowly opened his eyes and picked up the Zoisha ancestor's body that was lying on the riverbed. Although this item was said to be spoiled once it left the soil, he had already prepared a way to deal with it before he came to Mount Qingsuan. He shook his hand and sent a ball of Earth Element's 6th essence qi onto it. This qi was something he had obtained from the Clear Feather sect to refine the mysterious yellow dragon capturing hand. With the nourishment of the earth essence, the Zoisha ancestor's shell trembled slightly, and its originally dim surface seemed to have become a little more glossy. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and took out his human pouch. He wrapped the Ganoderma from head to toe and rolled up his sleeves before putting it into the pouch. After doing this, he was about to cut open his body like last time and expel the strange qi that had invaded his body. However, just as he raised his hand, a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. That green-robed young man's green qi was really too strange. Just a little bit of it was already so troublesome for him. It was as if he had to cut open his flesh and let out his blood every time. If he really fought with this person for a few hours, who knew how much more strange qi would invade his body? Could it be that he had to use this method to deal with it? When he thought of this, he suddenly thought of something and thought to himself, not only can this ball of true fire in the orifices be used to refine the gold core, it also has the ability to cleanse impurities. Once it's released, it'll be extremely powerful. Doesn't that mean it can also be used to expel this strange qi? What he was thinking was actually reasonable. However, this yang fire was the key to forming the gold core, and it was formed from the innate essence of yang. Once a person was born, how much they had in their body would be how much they had. Once they lost it, they would not be able to replenish it. Therefore, every cultivator would hide it deep within their body and protect it carefully, not daring to suffer even the slightest bit of damage. Unless it was absolutely necessary, they would never release this yang fire. Zhang Yan only felt that since this yang fire had such an effect, it would be too much of a waste not to use it. Thus, he intended to test the power of this yang fire. If other people encountered this problem, they would definitely not dare to try this, but he was different. With the broken jade in hand, he could boldly give it a try. After making up his mind, he closed his eyes and reached into his sleeve. His mind merged with the broken jade, and he began to deduce. After a few breaths, he opened his eyes again, and his eyes were filled with surprise. He shouted, and the water around him was suddenly pushed away, separating from him. Then, he urged the yang fire to rush towards the strange qi. It was like boiling water splashing snow. In the blink of an eye, the strange qi was burned away, leaving only the purest spiritual breath. At this moment, his eyes flashed, and the yang fire in his orifices wrapped around the spiritual breath. In an instant, they merged together. Not only did it not decrease, but the flame grew a bit stronger. He nodded slightly. This result was clear to him from the broken jade. As for why it was like this, he could not figure out the reason. Thus, he was able to escape in time at the critical moment. He was also very daring, deducing that if the young man in green had obtained the spiritual item, he would definitely not stay here for long, so he had just escaped and turned back. He first turned his brother's corpse into a coffin, but he was unwilling to give up, so he returned to the underground to investigate. After entering the cave, he walked around carefully, looking at the traces left behind by the high-quality medicinal herbs, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. With his eyesight, he could almost instantly tell what kind of item was left behind. He was sure that the spiritual item that emitted a thick wood qi was definitely not something these high-quality medicinal herbs could compare to, and this item might be the legendary Zoisha ancestor's body. His gaze flickered indeterminately. From the situation in the abode, it seemed that someone else had entered this place from another cave, and the mountain-splitting tremor he heard later seemed to have been caused by the battle between these two people. Thus, the person who obtained the spirit item might not be the green-clothed youth. Thinking of this, he was unwilling to give up. This spiritual item was originally discovered by him and his brother together, but it was taken by someone else, and even his brother had lost his life because of it. No matter what, he had to avenge this, and he had to find a way to snatch that spiritual item back. However, whether it was that young man in green or the person who fought with him, they were not people that he could contend against. He thought for a while, and his eyes shone with hatred, and said, "If I can't get it, then any one of you will get it." He first took out a talisman, and used a mysterious light to carve a few words on it. With a clap of his hands, the talisman turned into a long rainbow, and flew away without a trace. Then, he leaped up and headed towards 1,000 Feet Peak. In less than 4 hours, he arrived at 1,000 Feet Peak. This place had long been marked by the Shi clan, and no one was allowed to enter without disguise. Therefore, after he deliberately revealed himself, he only circled around the peak a few times, and he was seen by the Shi clan. Immediately, a cultivator flew up to the cloud, and said, "Where are you from? Don't you know that the Shi clan forbids you from entering this place?" Pan Yang hurriedly said, "I'm Pan Ming from Anqiu sect, and I've met fellow Taoist Shi once before. I'm here to tell you some important matters." That cultivator saw that he spoke sincerely, and hesitated for a while, and said, "Please wait for a moment." Then, he went into the depths of the peak. In less than a moment, he turned back, and said, "Fellow Taoist, follow me." Pan Yang made up his mind, and followed that cultivator into a dense forest. After crossing a mountain stream, on a cliff, he saw Shi Yifan sitting on a big rock from afar, and there were a dozen servants beside him. Pan Yang quickly descended the cloud, and went forward to greet him. Shi Yifan was a lazy person, and after taking a look at him, he didn't even put down the whip in his hand, and casually cupped his hands at him, and said, "Fellow Taoist Pan, what brings you here? Pan Yang looked to his left and right. His lips moved, and he spilled out what he knew word by word. Shi Yifan was still a little careless at first, but as he listened, his eyes lit up, and he suddenly stood up, and stared at him, and said, "Is this true?" Pan Yang said loudly, "It's true." Shi Yifan clenched his fists, and then loosened them, and suddenly asked, "Who else did you tell about this?" Pan Yang smiled, and said, "I've already told Miss Yen about this." "What?" Shi Yifan angrily took 2 steps forward, and raised the whip in his hand. Then, as if he thought of something, he snorted, and put down the whip, and said mockingly, "Fellow Taoist, you're quite smart." Pan Yang calmly said, "Not at all. I'm weak, and I'm alone, so I have no choice but to tell you about this." This was also his way of protecting himself. Yan Yuyo and Shi Yifan, no matter which of them he told about this, they would think that he could devour the Zoisha ancestor alone, and to prevent the news from leaking out, they wouldn't let him live. But now that both of them knew about this, there was no need to kill him. After all, he was also a disciple of Anchio faction, not a rogue cultivator. And the reason why he chose to come to Shi Yifan, and only sent the talisman to Yan Yuyo, was because this woman was temperamental, and she did whatever she wanted. He was not sure if this woman would kill him in a fit of anger. Shi Yifan thought for a long time, and he also felt that since Yan Yuyo knew about this, there was no way to avoid it, so he might as well be honest. Though he might not believe that the green-robed young man Pan Yang spoke of was so powerful, but the world was unpredictable, and it was never wrong to be cautious. If he and Yan Yuyo worked together, they would have a higher chance of success. Once he made up his mind, he said excitedly, "Men, call everyone back, and follow me to Pear Blossom Peak." A servant said, "Young master, are we not going to search for the Zoisha root in this mountain?" Shi Yifan lashed out with the whip, and the servant's skin split open, and he laughed, "The Zoisha root is good, but how can it compare to the Zoisha ancestor?" Target equals _blank. Chapter 242. Zhang Yan rushed to the cloud, and with a twist of his sleeve, the water that he brought up instantly coiled up like a tornado. He did not speak to the green-robed youth, but with a flip of his palm, he picked up the torrential water and pressed it down fiercely. Above the azure-clothed young man floated a ball of azure cloud that was over 60 m in diameter. When looked at from afar, it was completely flawless, and it was like a piece of verdant jade that was embedded in the drifting white clouds. At this moment, when he saw Zhang Yan charging down towards him from above, he couldn't help but curse angrily. Arrogant junior. He activated his mana and pushed the ball of green cloud upwards. When the two collided, there was a sudden thunder-like sound in the air. In an instant, the smoke and rain dispersed, and the green chi scattered. The ball of green cloud was actually shaken by a small part. Zhang Yan felt the strange chi invading his palm, but it was not like the previous time where it sneaked in. Instead, it released its offensive power and rushed into his body like a surging wave, as if it wanted to make him explode. He laughed and took a few steps back. He calmed his mind and let go of the yang fire in his sea of chi, allowing it to rush up. Suddenly, the fire devourer flame swallowed it, dispelling the huge amount of strange chi that rushed into his body. The flame went up and licked it, absorbing the remaining spiritual chi. In an instant, it was like being poured with boiling oil. The fire burned fiercely, as if it was going to burn through the Naiwan palace and rush out from the top. Zhang Yan did not expect that the moment the two of them came into contact, they would actually unleash such might in an instant. He was afraid that a little bit of it would leak out from the orifices and delay his future cultivation, so he quickly made a gesture to restore the boiling chi and suppressed the fire again. In his heart, he was secretly happy. With the help of this chi, the yang fire in my orifices will definitely be stronger. If I can do this a few more times, I will be able to burn all 36 orifices in 3 years in Mount Qingsuan. The green-robed youth had fought with Zhang Yan twice, and both times he was at a disadvantage. The first time was because he wanted to subdue Zhang Yan, so they separated after a short fight. The second time was because he was in too much of a hurry and was caught off guard, so he did not use his full strength. Right now, the ancestor Xi's body was related to his escape, so he was determined to use all his strength to take down Zhang Yan. However, he also knew that fighting against a strength cultivator like Zhang Yan would be disadvantageous if he stayed close to him. Thus, he extended his body and went up to the clouds. With a shake of his shoulder, countless chaotic clouds gathered above his head, and in an instant, the green clouds above his head returned to its original state. He looked up and saw that Zhang Yan seemed to have a strange expression on his face. He thought that it was because his qi had invaded Zhang Yan's body. He was secretly happy and shouted, "Li Yuanba, you don't know when to advance and retreat, you keep going against me. See how I will punish you today." He secretly took out the 5 spirits white carp shuttle in his hand, and with a "ha," he cast this magic treasure in the air. As soon as this magic treasure appeared, light floated, and colorful ripples reflected in the sky. Like a koi fish playing in the water, it swung its head and tail and rushed towards Zhang Yan. Seeing this treasure, Zhang Yan was secretly on guard. Just by looking at the spiritual nature of this object, he knew that it was not ordinary. For safety's sake, he did not rely on his strong body to take it head-on. With a thought, a clear light flew out from between his eyebrows, and rushed towards the spirit shuttle. The spirit shuttle seemed to find that this clear light was not to be trifled with, and dodged to the side, trying to avoid blocking it. However, this clear light did not let it go, and entangled with it, as if it had identified its prey in its mouth, and was determined to bite it. In a few breaths, these 2 profound weapons blocked left and right, flying and flashing, like butterflies flying back and forth, chasing each other back and forth, and actually in a deadlock. The green-robed youth did not expect that Zhang Yan had a profound weapon on him to protect himself. Seeing that the 5 spirits white carp shuttle did not work, his face could not help but turn ugly. If a cultivator of the Qi Dao wanted to kill a cultivator of the Strength Dao, if he could not succeed in one strike, then he could only use the method of entanglement, and use the method of slowly wearing down the opponent's inner breath and true Qi to death. Ever since the green-robed youth entered the Dao, he had never fought with anyone for a long time. However, in this great void defense formation, he was only a doppelganger, and his strength was suppressed to the bottom. Even though he was extremely unhappy with this, he had no choice but to do so. He cursed in his heart and made a hand seal. The green cloud above his head suddenly split into cloud flowers of various sizes, like the waves of a bamboo sea, emitting a myriad of green and jade colors. These cloud flowers shook again, and in a split second, they turned into countless fine jade needles that fell down with a whistling sound. Zhang Yan saw that the jade needles were falling from the sky, and they were like fine rain, and almost covered a radius of a few miles. There was no space for him to dodge. Although he wanted to borrow the opponent's strange qi to strengthen his true fire, he would not be beaten up blindly. That would inevitably arouse the opponent's suspicion. Therefore, he leaped up, and his hands moved repeatedly, and slapped away the pine needle-like qi of essence, all the way towards the green-robed youth. How could the green-robed youth allow him to get close again? His body shook, and he flew away in a green light. Zhang Yan looked at the direction where the green-robed youth was escaping, and with a shake of his sleeve, he threw out the 2 golden hammers, and with another incantation, they turned into 2 spiraling golden lights, and hit in that direction. The green-robed youth laughed, and did not dodge. He only raised his hand and patted the green cloud above his head. Immediately, pieces of green leaves flew out, and caught the 2 golden hammers, preventing them from falling. Zhang Yan moved forward in this jade needle-like cloud. At first, he could still determine the direction, but later on, those cloud flowers kept flying out from the green cloud, and then turned into countless green lights that fell down. Not only could he not see the green-robed youth's figure, but it also became difficult to move. In the sky, there seemed to be an endless green tide revolving around him, and he was squeezed into a cramped circle. The green-robed youth sat on the cloud, and looked down coldly. Every time the green cloud above his head shrunk a little, he would take out a medicinal herb from his sleeve and eat it. Then, he would silently use his cultivation method, and the cloud would expand again. He was also ruthless. Now that the area within a 10-mile radius was shrouded by his mysterious cloud, he did not need to worry about the other party escaping. Strength cultivators were also famous for not being good at flying. As long as he slowly surrounded him, he did not believe that Li Yuanba would be able to wear him down. But he did not know that this move was exactly what Zhang Yan wanted. Zhang Yan looked like he was struggling bitterly, passively resisting in this piece of green cloud, but in fact, he was secretly activating the yang fire in his aperture. But when the strange qi came in, it only burned the yang fire, and then swallowed the essence qi, and the fire would grow a little stronger. He did not know how carefree his heart was. Unknowingly, the two of them had already fought for 6 hours. Not only did Zhang Yan not feel exhausted, he instead became stronger as they fought. A single punch of his would cause a violent gale to surge and blast a hole in the azure tide that was like a sea. The green-robed youth was also puzzled. At this time, he had already swallowed the second medicinal herb, but this Li Yuanba did not show any signs of fatigue or instability. Moreover, in such an intense battle, the essence qi that he had invaded the other's body should have taken effect long ago, so why did this person not fall? Could it be that there was some method that could restrain that essence qi? He frowned. Strength cultivators could not eliminate this possibility, but if that was really the case, with the deep cultivation that this Li Yuanba had shown now, it was likely that they would not be able to determine the victor even if they fought for another 10 days or 8 months. Thinking of this, his heart was filled with irritation. But now that they had come to this point, he could not stop. The green-robed youth pondered for a while, then said, Li Yuanba, to be able to last until now, you can be considered a character. Why don't I tell you honestly, this time, even if you take this Zoisha ancestor's body away from this Mount Qing Cun, I can still find you. At that time, your soul will disappear, and you will die without a burial. If you are willing to obediently hand over this body, I can still spare your life on account of how difficult it was for you to cultivate. Zhang Yan laughed and said, natural spiritual objects, those who are fated to obtain them. If fellow Taoist has the ability, then feel free to come and take them. The green-robed youth's face twitched, and he pointed at him angrily and scolded, if you want to die wholeheartedly, do you think I cannot fulfill your wish? He gathered his mana, and in an instant, the green waves surged, and the bamboo brushed the clouds. From the green clouds above, rays of clear light shone down, and swept downwards. When the two of them were fighting, Ho Sanlang had been watching from the top of a mountain. After watching for a while, he was also secretly shocked by Zhang Yan's strength. He pondered in his heart, this Li Yuanba is so powerful, and it seems that he is not afraid of the demon's strange methods. If that's the case, if I go and rely on him, I might have a day where I can be free. He did not suspect that Li Yuanba was Zhang Yan, because the two of them cultivated different paths. In his opinion, no matter how Zhang Yan changed his appearance, it was impossible for him to change his cultivation. At this moment, he was secretly thinking about how to escape from the green-robed youth, and ask Zhang Yan to help him. No matter how he thought about it, the Ho clan's name was not enough, but if he used the Shao clan's name, he would have some confidence. At this moment, as if he felt something, he looked to the side and saw a few balls of light flying over from afar. He could not help but be startled, and his eyes flickered, and he retreated into the forest, hiding himself. That person did not seem to want to alarm the two of them, and did not go near the battle. He landed on a mountain peak, and as the light dispersed, Shi Yifan and Yan Yuyo were revealed. Shi Yifan's eyes stared straight ahead, and he could not help but say in surprise, looking at the green-robed youth's appearance, he must be the person Ho Sanlang was talking about. These two people are really impressive. If it was me alone, I would definitely not be able to take them down. I wonder who has the Zoisha ancestor's body. Originally, it was not that easy to find the fight between the young man in green and Zhang Yan. It was just that the two of them were fighting so loudly that it stirred up the spiritual qi in Mount Qingsuan. That was why they were able to find it. Yan Yuyo looked at Zhang Yan with burning eyes, and said, look at the person who is trapped, his name is Li Yuanba, I originally wanted to take him in as a guest. Shi Yifan showed a hint of playfulness, and said, what about now? Yan Yuyo raised her eyebrows, and said, how can I not get the person I want? Shi Wulong, you are not allowed to fight with me. Shi Yifan unconsciously looked at her a few times, and could only shake his head helplessly. Just by looking at how this Li Yuanba was able to deal with the green-robed youth's ferocious attacks with ease, he knew how powerful this person was. Although he had not heard of this person's name before, such a person must have obtained some kind of immortal abode's luck to be able to cultivate to this level. If there were no accidents, there would be hope for him to achieve Dan in the future, so why would he easily submit to someone else? Unless, his heart skipped a beat, and he looked up at Zhang Yan, who seemed to be in a passive situation, and guessed Yan Yuyo's plan. Target equals _blank. Chapter 243. Shi Yifan guessed that Yan Yuyo must have seen how strong the green-clothed youth was, so she was eager to help Li Yuanba and wanted to help him immediately. But in that case, there would be one more person to share the Zoisha ancestor with. How could Shi Yifan be willing to do that? He did not know what Yan Yuyo and Li Yuanba had talked about, but if this person was really roped in by her, how could he stop the two of them from suppressing him? Yan Yuyo's words caused many thoughts to run through his mind, and he began to calculate the pros and cons of the situation. Although with Yan Yuyo's temperamental personality, she might not have so many twists and turns in her mind, but because it involved Shi Yifan's own interests, he had no choice but to think about it. Therefore, he said, Junior sister Yan, the human heart is unpredictable. If you and I go up now, Li Yuanba might not appreciate it. Wouldn't it be better for us to stay here and watch the two of them fight each other and reap the benefits? Hearing this, Yan Yuyo turned to look at Shi Yifan with a meaningful gaze, and said playfully, is Wulong worried that with Li Yuanba's help, I will swallow the share that belongs to you? Shi Yifan wasn't embarrassed in the slightest when his thoughts were seen through, and he simply admitted it frankly. It's exactly like that. Junior sister Yan really understands my thoughts. Our clans have been friends for generations, so why should an outsider benefit from it? Don't you think so? Yan Yuyo smiled and waved her hand lightly, saying, Wulong, don't worry. Li Yuanba is proud and arrogant, and I thought I could subdue him. But now it seems that his cultivation is profound, and he can fight evenly with the green-clothed man. It was just my wishful thinking before. He most likely won't submit to me. But in Junior Sister's opinion, if Li Yuanba is defeated, with our current cultivation, it is still not enough to take down the green-clothed man. Shi Yifan was stunned. He frowned and asked tentatively, then Junior Sister's plan is? Yan Yuyo chuckled and said, if Wulong is willing to help, I have a treasure that can take down both of them in one fell swoop. Shi Yifan was surprised, what kind of treasure could be so powerful? No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't think of any Dharma treasure in the Yen clan that had such power. Could it be a profound level weapon? However, even for a large clan like the Yen clan, a profound level weapon would not be given to a junior like her. Yan Yuyo raised her white hand and said, Wulong, please look. Chinese website/download, with a point of her jade-like finger, a small black banner flew out from her sleeve. With a shake of the banner, cold smoke and black clouds floated up. Inside the smoke, one could faintly see thousands of pale-skinned cultivators with blood-red lips and lifeless eyes. Shi Yifan suddenly widened his eyes and exclaimed, Shen Bodong, Wang Hui, Yan Zhenfeng, Wu Jiaojiao, these people were the cultivators that Yan Yuyo had found an excuse to kill over the years. Among them, there were even a few disciples from large sects with outstanding talent. Previously, he heard that they had gone missing, but he didn't expect them to be here. Now, it seemed like they were all walking corpses. Shi Yifan suddenly thought of something. He pointed at the banner and said with a trembling voice, why you're using the evil sect's corpse refining technique? Wulong, you have a good eye, Yan Yuyo praised. She then looked at the green-robed youth and Zhang Yan. With a wave of her hand, the banner returned to her hand. Now, as long as I can pull these two to my Een Fiend corpse burial banner, no one in the same generation as me will be able to compete with me. Shi Yifan's mind raced, then he suddenly remembered something and said, no wonder there was a flaw in your cultivation. I see. Wulong, you've noticed it. Yan Yuyo played with the banner in her hand and sighed. In order to cultivate this technique, my cultivation is not pure. But it doesn't matter. No matter how good the Yen clan is, it can only support me up to core transformation realm. What's so special about that? Once I've refined this banner, I'll have endless benefits that the clan can't give me. When Shi Yifan heard this, he felt something was wrong. Yan Yuyo's words and actions today were very different from usual, making him feel like a stranger. Furthermore, she shouldn't have told him about these secrets. The more this woman said, the more uneasy he felt. The corner of his eyes twitched, and he asked warily, Junior sister, how do you need me to help you? Yan Yuyo turned around and looked at him with a smile like a flower. She said, I just wanted to invite you up the banner, Wulong. Shi Yifan turned pale with fright when he heard this. He slapped the plump-horned Jinyun deer that he was sitting on, causing clouds to rise from its hooves. He was about to leave, but the moment he lifted his body, he felt the mount tremble and stood still. He immediately realized that Yan Yuyo must have done something when they were talking. He couldn't help but feel hatred in his heart, so he reluctantly abandoned the mount and tried to fly away. Yan Yuyo chuckled and said, Why are you in such a hurry to leave, Wulong? Are you not willing to help little sister? She raised her wrist and a fiery cloud flew over. Seeing how fast and fierce it was, Shi Yifan could see that this attack had been stored up for a long time, so he couldn't dodge it. He had no choice but to release his profound light to block it. Although he had successfully dispersed this ball of flying fire, his figure had also become sluggish, and he had lost the opportunity to escape. At the same time, Yan Yuyo held the baleful Een corpse burial banner in her hand. With a wave, dozens of black gas flew out, and on top of each black gas stood an expressionless Een corpse. Shi Yifan's heart tightened. Yan Yuyo's cultivation was similar to his, so if the two of them fought, it wouldn't be easy to determine the winner. If there were dozens of Een corpses, how could he resist them? Escaping was the most important thing right now, so he quickly took out a palm-sized mirror from his sleeve and waved it at the dozens of people. The mirror released a white light, like the sun melting the snow and the moon dispersing the clouds. With just one light, it pierced through the chest of one of the people in front of him. This mirror was called the Qi Melting Mirror, and it was very powerful. Anyone that was hit by the mirror light would be pierced through their flesh and blood, destroying their flesh. Under the light, the dozens of Een corpses were torn to pieces by the light, no longer in human shape. Yan Yuyo's face was full of ridicule. With a wave of the banner, baleful Een Qi fell down and filled the wounds of the dozens of Een corpses, allowing them to reform. These Een corpses were no longer normal people, their cultivation had turned into baleful Een Qi, and their bodies were between tangible and intangible. In terms of strength, they couldn't be compared to when they were alive, but under the control of the baleful Een corpse banner, thousands of Een corpses that didn't fear death would charge at them. If a normal cultivator were to encounter them, how would they be able to stop them? After fighting for a while, Shi Yifan felt tired. He saw that he was surrounded by Een corpses on all sides, with cold smoke and cold wind blowing. He couldn't help saying angrily, Yan Yuyo, you dare to kill me? Are you not afraid of my Shi family's revenge? Are you not afraid of bringing disaster to your Yan family? Yan Yuyo gave a contemptuous smile and snorted, this lady's baleful Een corpse banner needs 3 more main corpses to reach the small success stage. Then I'll go to the ancestral hall to get the decree and I'll be able to obtain my sex ancient technique. In the future, I'll have a chance to reach the Tao. With such an immortal fate in hand, why would I care about such a small matter? When Shi Yifan heard this, he completely gave up and started scolding, only using the most vicious words. But Yan Yuyo looked at him with interest, as if she wasn't angry at all. Under the encirclement of the Yin corpses that didn't know what fatigue was, Shi Yifun's Yin qi surged over, and in just a moment his heart and lungs felt cold. His hands and feet became stiff, as if he was placed in 10,000-year-old ice. After struggling for an hour, he couldn't hold on any longer. The Yin corpses let out roars and swarmed over him. That inky black Yin qi wrapped around him and sucked his blood dry in an instant. With a wave of the banner, Yan Yuyo captured a wisp of Shi Yifun's nascent soul. After circulating the incantation a few times, with another wave of the banner, a broken soul flew down from the banner and gathered the billowing black smoke. Then, Shi Yifun stood up once again, but his face was lifeless and pale. Yan Yuyo gave an order in her heart, and Shi Yifun obediently walked in front of her and handed over the qi-transforming mirror. Yan Yuyo held the mirror on the Chinese website. She had pretended to have a strange temper and used it as an excuse to kill many people in order to refine this banner. However, in order to refine this banner, not only did she need 365 mystic light realm cultivators, she also needed 3 main corpses that were above everyone else. The one Qi Ganoderma was secondary to her coming to the Green Inch Mountain. She only wanted to kill cultivators without any scruples and completely refine this banner to the small success stage. She looked at the 2 people who were still fighting in the distance and pondered for a while. Then, her phoenix eyes flashed. She waved her hand and threw out a set of formation flags. She shouted at the Yin corpses, "Take these formation flags and go to the corner of the formation." These Yin corpses received the order and received the array flags, then they scattered in all directions. Yan Yuyu reached into the pouch on her chest and took out an incense burner. With a flick of her finger, a flame flashed and lit the incense burner. In a flash, smoke rolled out and transformed into a boundless mist that suffused the air. The incense within the furnace was called the 5-net smoke, and it came from the same sect as the Yin Fiend Corpse Chariot flag. If a cultivator who didn't know what was going on were to accidentally inhale a mouthful of the smoke, they would be bewitched and lose their minds. Not long after, Yan Yu felt something in her mind. She knew that it was the Yin corpses that had arranged the array. Her heart calmed down. She thought that her arrangement was perfect, so she slapped the cloud couch under her and flew into the air. With a wave of the Yin Fiend Corpse Chariot, several hundred strands of black smoke fell from it. The several hundred Yin corpses let out mournful howls as they charged at Zhang Yan and the blue-clothed youth. The green-robed youth and Zhang Yan were in the middle of a fierce battle. Suddenly, they saw dark clouds rolling in the south, and a cloud of black qi that blotted out the sky and covered the earth was flying towards them. Both of them stopped fighting at the same time. The blue-clothed youth had his hands behind his back in the air. He looked at them and angrily laughed. Which junior doesn't know life from death and dares to provoke this one? Zhang Yan waved his hand and 2 golden hammers flew over from the sky and circled around him. Looking at the dark clouds that were howling miserably like a tide that covered the sky, he shouted, "Demons and monsters, you dare to make a fool of yourself. Quickly kill them, it won't be too late for us to fight again. Target equals _blank. Chapter 244. Yan Yuyu saw the 2 of them stop fighting, as if they were going to join hands against the enemy, but she did not panic. This matter was already within her expectations. /advertisement for full text download. She silently chanted an incantation, and the black gas on the flag became even denser. The dark clouds on all sides merged together in the sky, as if imprisoning this part of the world in a cage. She held the Yin Fiend Corpse flag in her hand. Feeling the waves of Yin Qi coming from the flag, her heart was filled with confidence. Different from normal battles, this flag of hers was used to suppress people. With a single command, thousands of Yin corpses would charge forward. No matter how long you struggled, if you didn't have a way to break the flag, you would die sooner or later. As a member of the Yen family, her experience was not something a normal cultivator could compare to. The reason she chose this evil cultivation technique was because once she used the Yin Fiend Corpse flag, no one under the core transformation realm could break it. Moreover, the most important thing was that there was a path to the heavens ahead of her, so she wouldn't have to worry about the clan anymore. She was a disciple of the profound sect, but on the surface, she was actually heavily restricted. She was bound by the rules of the clan, especially after she reached the core transformation realm. Every year, she would have to run around for the clan's younger generation disciples for a period of time in order to continue the inheritance of the clan. Unless she could truly become a Taoist master, she would be free just now. But Yan Yu understood that her talent was not the best in the clan. The clan could only support her up to the core transformation realm, but there was little hope for her to go any further. If she didn't have a great opportunity, she would have no hope of living a long life. She was not willing to give up on this. But once she refined this flag, she would be able to inherit the clan's legacy, allowing her to walk on the path to the heavens. How could she not firmly grasp this opportunity? Even if she was expelled from the clan because of this, she would accept it. At this time, the several hundred Yin corpses had already killed their way in front of Zhang Yan and the blue-clothed youth. These Yin corpses had no expression on their faces and their minds were not clear, only knowing how to kill. They had already been entangled with the baleful Yin aura, and when they flew over, the area below their waists mixed with the baleful Yin aura. They let out howling sounds as they flew, looking like ghosts that were born from the dark clouds. Zhang Yan was not afraid in the face of this surging tide. He stood in front of it, clenched his fists, and took a deep breath. His chest bulged, and he suddenly opened his mouth to exhale, and suddenly let out a loud shout. When this shout came out, it was like the roar of a dragon or tiger. The sound shook the surroundings and instantly stirred up a wave of air that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. The black fog that was like a rolling wave seemed to have hit a reef. In the blink of an eye, the dark clouds split apart and the cold smoke scattered. The dozens of Yin corpses in front of it instantly exploded. /advertisement for full text TXT download. The Yin corpses were attacked as soon as they charged forward. Yan Yu was also a little surprised. She quickly waved the banner and gathered the Yin corpses into a pile. She once again aggressively charged forward. Zhang Yan let out a breath. When he was about to take a breath, he saw that the color of the fog was not pure and it was strange. He became vigilant and closed his mouth and nose. He also sealed all the pores on his body and only adjusted his breathing. Even if a normal cultivator did this, it would be hard for the baleful Yin Qi to enter their body. But his body was as hard as metal, the baleful Yin Qi could not enter his body at all. He gave a loud shout and sent out a punch. The sound of the air breaking rang out and the wind from his fist surged out. Instantly, the Yin corpses fell to the ground. Facing the pressure of his fist, the dozens of Yin corpses were instantly swept away, revealing a large area. At this time, there was only a rumbling sound that could be heard. Although the Yin corpses continued to charge forward, he was like a mountain in the middle of the sea. The blue-clothed youth was also surrounded by dozens of Yin corpses. Seeing these things that were human yet not human, like ghosts yet not ghosts, he gave a cold snort. The blue cloud above his head trembled and blue flowers floated out. They spread out several miles and fell down like falling flowers. Once they fell into the black Yin Qi, there was a glowing blue light that shined like a light. Wherever the light went, the Yin corpses were all turned to dust. He saw that these Yin corpses were only SOSO and his heart filled with disdain. Looking up, he saw that his surroundings were filled with a black fog. Even with his current body's eyesight, he could not see through it and could not see where the person holding the banner was. He felt impatient and shouted, "Li Yuanba, you and I will each pick a side. Whoever sees this junior first will kill him first." After saying this, he did not care if Zhang Yan heard him or not. He charged towards the direction he had been looking for. Although the Yin corpses had surrounded him, they were all scattered by the blue flowers. Zhang Yan thought for a bit. His hands spread out and the two golden hammers appeared in his hands. His feet moved and he charged in the opposite direction of the blue-clothed youth. Yan Yu saw that the two of them were looking for her, but she was not anxious. She raised her jade hand and activated the array she had prepared. This array was not a strong array. If there was no one to stop it, the blue-clothed youth and Zhang Yan could easily break it with their full strength. But Yan Yu was not worried at all. With the Yin corpses restraining them, the two of them would not be able to do anything. The green-clothed young man searched for a long time in the mist, but he couldn't find a way out in the end. He immediately knew that he was trapped by a formation, so he sneered and said, "Junior, do you think this formation can stop me?" He waved his sleeves and the blue clouds above his head shook. It was as if a green bead curtain had appeared in front of him. The Yin corpses that came from behind were hit by this green curtain and were immediately scattered. Taking advantage of this gap, he pinched his fingers and began to deduce the array door. Yan Yu's heart tightened. She turned her hand and took out the chi-transforming mirror, and shone it at the bottom. The blue-clothed youth felt it and a blue flower fell from the blue cloud above his head to block it. A snow-white light instantly passed through the blue flower and shone on his shoulder. A large piece of bone and skin was scraped off. The blue-clothed youth gave a groan and quickly retreated to the side while holding his shoulder. Although this body did not belong to him, it was still painful. If it was damaged too much, he would not be able to live in it anymore. Therefore, he did not care about finding an opportunity to break the formation. He pointed his finger and from the green cloud, a piercing jade-green light flew out and shot towards the direction of the mirror light like 10,000 arrows. The enemy was in the light while he was in the dark. Yan Yu was not afraid. She only moved to the side and easily dodged it. She saw the blue-clothed youth retreat into the array and leave the range of the mirror light. She also stopped and did not move forward. She only needed to stop the two of them from breaking the array. These Yin corpses did not fear the corrosion of the mysterious light or the burning of the sun. After being scattered, they could regroup. No matter how strong the enemy was, under this seemingly endless siege, they would eventually reveal a flaw and come up to her banner. Taking a step back, even if the two of them guarded the door tightly and the wind and rain could not pass through, sooner or later there would be a time when they would not be able to continue. The longer time passed, the more advantageous the situation became for her. At this time, she suddenly felt the banner in her hand tremble. She was startled but her heart was filled with joy. She quickly waved the banner and a person walked out from the dark cloud and stood in front of her. Looking at this person's face, it was Shi Yifan. But he did not have a dull expression like before. Instead, his eyes were fierce and his eyebrows were filled with killing intent. It seemed like he had regained his consciousness. Yan Yu did not think that in just a moment, the main corpse on the banner would be refined. This was the help of the heavens. With this main corpse in front of her, he could replace her in controlling the Yin corpses. There was no need for her to do everything herself. Thinking of this, she sent out a divine sense. Shi Yifan immediately understood. He bowed and said, respectfully receiving the decree. Yan Yu saw that the main corpse opened its mouth to speak. It was more intelligent than she had expected. She couldn't help being pleasantly surprised. She rejoiced that she did not choose the wrong method. With Shi Yifan as the main corpse, the Yin corpses seemed to have gained intelligence. They weren't as stiff as before, only knowing how to kill. Rather they flew back and forth, attacking together, with a bit of order in their movements. Seeing this, Yan Yu's spirit was shaken. She thought, no wonder the records say that the main corpse is like a Yin general and the group of corpses are like Yin soldiers. A snake cannot survive without a head and a bird cannot fly without wings. So this is the reason. Only with the main corpse can the power of these 350 Yin corpses be used to their fullest. The blue-clothed youth was not as relaxed as before. Now that a blue flower had fallen, it could only drive away a few Yin corpses. Sometimes it could even be dodged. Most of the Yin corpses were hidden in the black fog, waiting for an opportunity to attack. Although his cultivation was profound, he did not dare to let these Yin corpses get close to him. What was more troublesome was that his body had been punched by Zhang Yan. Now that he was heavily injured, he was becoming weaker. If he did not circulate his cultivation technique to repair himself, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on for long. He snorted and simply dropped the blue cloud on top of his head to protect his body. Then he took out the 1 chi zoisha from his sleeve and swallowed it. He circulated his cultivation technique to refine it. Yan Yu looked at him. Seeing that the blue-clothed youth was hiding in the blue cloud, she could not do anything to him. She also did not want to take any risks. So she looked at Zhang Yan. Seeing that he was waving his hammers and guarding the door, he did not panic at all. She could not help but think, this Li Yuanba is the person that this lady wants to subdue. Why don't I take this person into the banner first? She rose up and turned around to the other side of the formation. She raised the treasure mirror and pointed it at Zhang Yan, and a white rainbow shot out. At this moment, Zhang Yan also noticed that he had fallen into a formation, but he did not want to expend effort to deduce the location of the formation door. Even if the formation was simple, it would still consume his vitality. He saw that the surroundings were enveloped in a thick fog. The Yin corpses were like clouds and waves. After one wave was dispersed, another wave would surge over. It was obviously impossible to kill them all. However, an idea arose in his heart and he thought to himself, since I started cultivating that technique, I have not even used it in the Clear Feather sect because I was afraid that others would notice it. Why not give it a try now? Just as he was planning a countermeasure, he suddenly felt a burning aura that was completely different from the Yin corpses charging towards him. He laughed lightheartedly and shouted loudly. His body shook like a mountain torrent bursting through a dam, causing a muffled thunderclap to resound out in midair. An extremely clear and pure water-colored light screen soared up from behind him. As soon as this light appeared, it was like a surging flood that charged into the vast plains or a flowing wind that swept through a distance of 5 million kilometers. It swept through the entire expanse of Yin fog with a sweeping force, and in the blink of an eye, all the desolate clouds, miserable winds, Yin corpses, and fog had vanished. Target =_blank. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.